Chapter 875. Zhang Yan floated down and landed on a mountain peak. This was the highest point in the surrounding 10,000 miles. If he looked further, he would see a vast ocean. The spiritual opportunity of the earth vein was like a dragon hiding in the abyss, but it was not untraceable. As long as he followed the direction of the earth vein, he would be able to find out the ins and outs. He sat cross-legged and calculated for a moment. After a while, he had a rough idea. He shook his sleeves and leaped into the sky from the mountain top and flew on his sword. After traveling south for more than half a day, he found a place that seemed to have hidden chi of essence. However, there were traces of a formation outside. It was obvious that it was already occupied by someone. He looked around but did not go forward. Instead, he turned to another place. Before coming here, Taoist Meng had said that there were many ferocious creatures in this small world. In other words, it was possible to find the earthine essence in this place where these strange creatures cultivated. In this case, if there was a choice, there was no need to clash with the cultivators here. He continued to search according to the spiritual vigor, and a day later, he arrived at a green hill. He saw a valley full of green trees and strange flowers, ancient vines, pines and cypresses, flowing water and spring flowed along the cliff, jade pearls sprinkled down, the 7 colors shone brightly like a rainbow. It was such a good place, but there were no birds or beasts. Instead, there was a faint smell of blood that shrouded the valley. One look and one could tell that there were demons here. However, looking at the chi, it was at most a Dan transformation cultivator. It was not a threat to him. Hence, he did not pay much attention to it. He stepped on the cloud and stood on top of the cliff. He took out the Yen Zhu bottle in his hand and threw it into the sky. He turned the mouth of the bottle and pointed it downwards. He used his mana to point at it. In an instant, the chi was drawn back and the chi of essence was drawn out. The effect of this bottle was completely dependent on the cultivator's magic power. The stronger the magic power, the more spiritual essence it could guide. Among his peers, there were few who could compare with his magic power. This time, when he activated it, the spiritual energy within 100 miles was drawn, as if it had found a place to vent. In an instant, it formed a torrent and gathered towards his bottle. At this moment, in the mountain, there was a middle-aged Taoist with a wide face and a long beard meditating in his abode. Suddenly, he felt an unusual movement in the chi of the earth and stood up abruptly. He said in shock and anger, "Who's stealing my spiritual chi?" He tried to sense it, but felt a tightness in his chest. He coughed up a mouthful of blood. He was instantly horrified. The other party's chi activity had merely sensed each other's chi activity, yet he was able to throw his internal chi into chaos. How shocking was the person's dermic powers! Could it be that a person with such divine power is the Duchen Sect's exalted master? Knowing that the other party was so powerful, he didn't dare to go out even though he knew that the other party was seeking earth chi. Instead, he tried his best to hide his aura, hoping that he wouldn't cause trouble for them. While Zhang Yan was collecting the vital energy, he was pondering exactly where the fortuitous encounter he should obtain to break through. "I've been practicing the Taishian True technique. Would it be possible to start from there?" If he wanted to use this to create a heavenly abode, he would have to perfect this technique. Let's not talk about whether he could do it or not. Even if he succeeded, would it mean that he had found his own Tao? He pondered for a moment, then shook his head. This could only be considered a way to seek longevity, but it wasn't the Tao of longevity. Just like the boat that crossed the ocean, the technique was just the item beneath one's feet, not the Permitha fruit. If one wanted to obtain it, then one had to roughly understand the heaven and earth situation and how it worked. If one didn't even understand this logic, then how would one seek Tao? It wasn't good to search like this without any clues. Even if one comprehended for thousands of years, one wouldn't gain anything. However, to explore the mysteries of this place wasn't something that he could do now. Thinking about this, he was deep in thought, thinking to himself, the various sages and experts wrote down the laws of heaven and earth using erosion inscriptions. Maybe I can start from there. he immediately made up his mind. Once this matter was over, he might as well look at such inscriptions and try to find some clues. However, in this small world, there might be many books left behind by seniors. Since he was here, then he could search around. After 3 days and 3 nights, under his vast mana, he even extracted a lot of the earth-en essence chi that was buried deep underground. Seeing that it was more or less done, he retracted his ability and kept the bottle. If he went all out just now, it would be enough to take away all the earth-en essence chi. However, he didn't do that. He couldn't be too extreme, so he left some earth energy to nourish and slowly accumulate. Although it wouldn't be able to return to its former state, the mountains and rivers could still be preserved. After putting away the vase, he formed a restraining spell and pulled the middle-aged Taoist out of the cave abode, throwing him in front of him. The Taoist was hiding in the mountains, and seeing that no one came to stop him, he was rejoicing. He didn't think that he wouldn't be able to escape. He said in a trembling voice, "Celestial Master, what instructions do you have for me?" Zhang Yan said calmly, "I see that your blood energy is turbid, like you ate a living person." When the middle-aged Taoist heard this, he was scared out of his wits. His original body was a white-furred tiger. He once obtained a Taoist book of Qi practitioners in the mountains. There were no heavenly tribulations or lightning disasters in this small world, and there was no lack of heavenly materials and earthly treasures. As a result, his cultivation went smoothly until he reached the Jindan stage. Now, he only needed a little more time before he could find a way to enter the Yuanying stage. He could be considered a demon king here. However, he was a demon after all. In the past, when he was greedy, he used to prey on living people. When Qi practitioners in the world lacked materials to refine, they loved to kill demons like him who had evil deeds in the past. He thought that the other party was the same, so he knelt on the ground and kowtowed, saying, "Master is wise, before I achieved Tao, I was just a beast in the mountains. I was ignorant and muddle-headed, and acted according to my nature. That's why I did such a wrong thing. However, after I took human form, I cultivated my heart and nature, and I never ate humans again." When he said this, he pointed to the sky and swore, saying hoarsely, "If I lied to you, I will be punished by the heavens." Zhang Yan smiled faintly, "If it wasn't so, you wouldn't have kept your life in front of me. Do you have a name?" The tiger spirit said, Yes, my name is Bai Shan Jun." Zhang Yan looked at him and said, "Where did you learn all these skills from?" Bai Shan Jun said honestly, "Years ago, I obtained a few pages of a broken scroll, and thus I cultivated a body of Tao techniques. I carry them with me, and I'm willing to offer them to you, Master." He rummaged around his chest for a while, and took out a few wrinkled pages. Zhang Yan did not take it, and only waved it in front of him. He looked up and knocked on it, and nodded slightly. From his point of view, these Tao techniques were quite good, and could be considered as orthodox xianmen. However, the beginning was fine, and there was nothing too extraordinary about it. It was just that the further he went, the more speculations there were. This attracted his attention, and he raised his eyebrows. "Other than these, is there anything else?" Bai Shan Jun was startled, and thought for a while. Suddenly, he remembered something, and said, "I'll be back soon." He scrambled out, and after a dozen steps, he remembered that he could still fly. He slapped his head, and rode a black smoke down the mountain. After a while, he ran out, and with both hands presented half of a broken jade scroll, and said, "This was placed together with the pages of the Tao book." Zhang Yan raised his finger, and his mana flowed into it. Immediately, a picture appeared in his mind, and after a brief look, he had an idea. As expected, the words in the Taoist book were only notes, and the real technique was here. The first half of the content was within the realm of the original owner, so the notes were clear and orderly, but the latter part was beyond his ability, so it was messy and broken. However, it only mentioned how to move one's qi. After reaching the second layer of the nascent soul realm, there was nothing else. It didn't even mention condensing one's dharma body, let alone the method to form a heavenly abode. Zhang Yan looked at it, and was not disappointed, and said, "I'll accept this." He put away the jade scroll, and with a shake of his sleeve, threw a bottle of pills. Bai Shan Jun quickly caught it, pulled out the stopper, and smelled it. He was overjoyed, and carefully put it away, and said, "Thank you, Celestial Master." Zhang Yan asked, "Are there any Taoist sects nearby?" Bai Shan Jun's heart skipped a beat, and he stole a glance at Zhang Yan, and said, 1,000 miles south from here, there are a few small sects, and they are all led by Celestial Master Changgong Mountain. Their abode is 100, or even 1,000 times better than this little demon's. Zhang Yan asked a few questions, and understood the situation. This small world was called Xuanlu Continent, and the place he was standing on was actually a remote place in the northern land, and there were not many people, so there were not many Taoist cultivators. There were only a few rogue cultivators, and because their cultivation levels were similar, they lived in harmony. 30 years ago, a Taoist named Fu Changyi came, and this person had already cultivated to the Yuanying realm, and he occupied Changgong Mountain, which had the best feng shui, and often asked for gifts from the Taoist cultivators and demons in the surrounding mountains. Bai Shan Jun said at the end, "This Fu Changyi has a bad temper, and often uses his cultivation level to bully people of the same generation. The surrounding Taoist friends are angry, but dare not say anything. If you go, you have to be careful." From his words, Zhang Yan knew that this person must have had a grudge with him in the past. His last words seemed to be concerned, but in fact, he was eager for him to go. He smiled, and did not say anything. With a flick of his sleeve, he wrapped the tiger spirit up, and flew south on the wind and clouds. After traveling for 1,000 miles, he could already see a mountain in front of him that was filled with treasure light and spiritual qi. He gestured with his eyes, and said, "Is it that place?" Bai Shan Jun stretched his head out to take a look, and said, "Yes, yes, Celestial Master's eyes are like torches, this little demon is convinced." Zhang Yan ignored his flattery, and threw him to the side of a mountain, and said, "Go on." Bai Shan Jun did not dare to meddle in the affairs of the two spiritual masters, and immediately ran away as if he was running for his life. Zhang Yan slightly circulated his mana, and his speed increased a little. Not long after, he arrived in front of the mountain, and stood in mid-air, and said loudly, "Is Spiritual Master Fu here? Sorry for the intrusion, uninvited guest." A few breaths after he said that, a yellow-robed Taoist with triangular eyes flew out on a cloud, and 2 clouds floated above his head. This person looked at Zhang Yan warily, and cupped his hands, saying coldly, "Fellow Taoist, where did you come from, and what business do you have with me?" Zhang Yan smiled, and said, "I'm here to collect some spiritual qi of the earth vein, but this mountain has long been occupied by you, so I'm willing to give you a talisman in exchange. What do you think, fellow Taoist?" When Taoist Fu heard this, his expression changed, and with a clang, he unsheathed his magic sword and hovered in the air, and said angrily, "How dare you? The earth qi is the spiritual root of this mountain, how can you take it? Leave now, or else don't blame me for killing you." Chapter 876. Zhang Yan's expression was natural. He could clearly see that the other party was speaking fiercely, but his eyes were filled with fear. It was obvious that he was just bluffing and did not dare to really fight with them. He acted as if he did not see the magic sword hanging in the sky and only said, "The spiritual essence in this place was originally hidden by my sect. Now that I have come to take it back, it's only because you are temporarily staying here. Out of righteousness, I will make up for what I owe. If you are not willing, it's fine. I can go and get it myself." Taoist Fu stomped his foot and said, "Nonsense. The spiritual essence here was born by the heavens. I'm the mountain master of this mountain, so it should belong to me. How can it belong to you?" Zhang Yanjing said, "This is not nonsense. More than 10,000 years ago, there were several powerful people who worked together to open up this realm, and the ancestor of this poor Taoist sect was one of them. In detail, this time, he is also here to take back his family's things." When Taoist Fu heard this, his expression changed slightly. He seemed to have thought of something and looked him up and down. He sneered and said, "Let's not talk about whether what you said is true or false. Even if it is, why didn't you come to take it earlier? After 10,000 years, just now you're here, saying that you're going to return it. How is this any different from a bandit's actions? Zhang Yan smiled and said, there's some truth to this. The original intention of those seniors who passed down their Taoist techniques here was to have them guard the earth qi here, so that they can wait for the rightful owner to come and take it. Since you've received karma, how can you not return it? Taoist Fu snorted and waved his sleeves. He said, I'm not here to talk to you about this. This is my territory. If you want to take it by force, I won't back down. Even if I'm not your match, there will be someone who will come and settle the score with you in the future. Zhang Yan smiled and said, since you insist, don't blame I, he was not an unreasonable person. After all, the other party had already taken root here. If they could talk nicely, he would not take away all the earth qi. He would even try to make up for it with a few talismans. In that case, he could only use the most direct method to solve this problem. Fu Dao knew that there was no way to resolve the situation peacefully. He shouted loudly and quickly gathered his spiritual energy to activate the sword in the sky and slashed down menacingly. At the same time, he hurriedly turned around and fled back the way he came. He had never had a rival in this place. He was used to acting like a tyrant. In addition, this was a desolate place. Just now, when he came out, he was a bit careless and didn't check Zhang Yan's cultivation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to come so close. There was a restriction set up in the cave. As long as they escaped, they would be able to escape. They could hold on for a few days before sending a letter to gather their fellow Taoists. However, they did not believe that they could not deal with this person. Zhang Yan casually waved his sleeve, and a flame flashed, instantly melting the magic sword. Then, he pointed with his finger. Surging magic power instantly spread out and immediately locked all the spiritual vigor within a radius of 50 kilometers. Taoist Fu's body trembled and he froze in midair, unable to move. He could not help but turn pale with fright. Since Zhang Yan had made his move, he would not show any mercy. With a thought, the Qinghong sword pill immediately sensed it. It turned into a ray of light and flew over. The protective treasure light around Taoist Fu's body couldn't stop it at all and was torn apart. However, just as it was about to hit his body, a talisman suddenly appeared and blocked the sword light, though it was only able to block it for a moment. Although it was able to block it for a while, the talisman broke into two under the sharp sword qi. A golden light flew out from it and instantly headed south. Taoist Fu looked at the sword light above him and felt his soul leaving his body. He hissed, I'm an elder of the Crossing Dust Monastery in the Xuanlu continent. Just now, the talisman that was taken off is my sect's core talisman. If you dare to kill me, the seniors of my sect will definitely not let you off. Zhang Yan sneered and activated his spiritual energy. The Qinghong sword pill gave a clear whistle and the sword light went up, piercing through Taoist Fu's chest. Taoist Fu screamed and fell from the sky. He hit the ground and died on the spot. Zhang Yan took a look and waved his sleeves. He lifted up a huge pile of soil and buried him deep. This person wasn't his mortal enemy. Since he was dead, he would bury him so that he wouldn't be eaten by wild beasts. He walked a few rounds in the mountain and chose a higher ground. He then sat down and threw Yan Zhuping into the air. He used his spiritual energy and started to absorb spiritual opportunity. This time, it took him more than 10 days to collect the earth qi, and the earth qi he collected was even purer than the last time. After he was done, he searched the mountain for a while, but didn't find anything special, so he leaped to another place. In the following month, he traveled back and forth between the mountains and rivers of the North Continent. Regardless of whether it was the fiendish or demon cultivators, when they saw his vast dermic powers, they would retreat first. There was not a single person like Taoist Fu who fought head-on. But thousands of miles away, the situation was very different. The 7 Xian men of the Donghua continent had no choice but to send their disciples to borrow Yuxiao School's magical weapons to enter the small world to collect spiritual energy. But as a result, they naturally had conflicts with the sects in the small world. At first, both sides restrained themselves. However, one side needed to obtain spiritual energy while the other side needed to protect their own sect. This made it impossible for the relationship to be eased, and the situation became more and more intense. Huandan Peak was one of the 3 peaks of the Xuanlu continent. It was where the most powerful sect in the continent, the Dukhen sect, was located. At this moment, there were 3 cultivators sitting cross-legged in the spacious hall. They were all wearing feathered robes and star crowns. On the main seat was the sect master, Yin Zhaokong. The 2 people on his left and right were the sect's 2 elders, Mo Zhaoyue and Lin Zhaofeng. All 3 of them had cultivated to the 3rd stage of Yuanying and achieved Dharmakaya. Mo Zhaoyue had a thick beard. He was tall and burly with thick limbs. His eyes were bright and his voice was like thunder when he spoke. The cultivators from beyond the heavens are getting more and more arrogant. They have destroyed 5 sects in a row. Many small sects have come to me for help. But the sect master wants to come up with a plan. Yin Zhaokong's sleeves were hanging down. He had a beautiful beard and his breath was deep like the waves of the sea. He had entered the 3rd stage at the age of 500 and had been the sect master for more than 200 years. He knew many secrets, but he didn't want to get involved in this matter. He said indifferently, "Did any of our disciples die?" Mo Zhaoyue said, "Not really. The sect master has given strict orders that the disciples are not to go out at will. No one dares to disobey." Yin Zhaokong said, "As long as they don't come to our sect, let them go." Mo Zhaoyue said anxiously, "But what about our fellow cultivators? Is the sect master going to ignore them?" Yin Zhaokong said, "So what if we show up? 1,000 years ago, the Shanghua sect was destroyed because of their strong stance. Our Crossing Earth sect took advantage of the situation and rose. Just now, we have today's momentum. Unless it is absolutely necessary, we cannot become enemies with these people from beyond the heavens." Mo Zhaoyue said, "Senior brother, do you think we can hide from them by hiding? If they really come to our Crossing Earth sect, what will we do?" Yin Zhaokong said indifferently, "Just let them have the sect." Mo Zhaoyue jumped up and glared at him. "What? Senior brother, how can you say such things? Isn't this the same as destroying our own foundation?" Yin Zhaokong said calmly, "As long as the 3 of us are here, if the sect is destroyed, we can just find another one." Then his tone became stern. "Today is a time of trouble. You stay in the mountain and are not allowed to go out. You are not allowed to promise anything to those small sections. You are not allowed to fight with those cultivators from beyond the heavens. If you disobey, I will punish you severely." Mo Zhaoyue's face turned red. He snorted and turned to leave. When Lin Zhaofeng saw this, he quickly excused himself and rushed out of the hall. When he arrived at Lin Zhaofeng's side, he said, "Senior Martial Brother, don't be angry. Senior Martial Brother sect master is just saying. My Crossing Earth sect has a grand formation, so no matter how many people they send, we won't be afraid. I believe those cultivators from beyond the heavens also know this, so they won't touch us." Mo Zhaoyue complained, "Junior brother, just now, why are you not saying anything? You always have your own ideas. With you persuading from the side, senior brother sect master might listen to you." Lin Zhaofeng laughed and didn't continue the topic. Instead, he asked, "Senior brother, do you think that at our level of cultivation, we can still go further?" Mo Zhaoyue was taken aback. Fiercely grabbing his beard, he said, "Junior brother must be joking. Since ancient times, to reach our level of cultivation is already the limit. If we go any further, there will be no more path." Lin Zhaofeng's eyes were filled with a strange brilliance as he said, "It's not that there's no way out. Senior brother should also know that according to the ancient records of our ancestors, we are bound by this world, which is why we are like this. If we can break free, it's not impossible to advance a step further." Mo Zhaoyue shook his head and said, "This matter is illusory. In the past 10,000 years, have you seen anyone succeed? Junior brother, it is better not to believe it." Lin Zhaofeng smiled and didn't continue. After parting ways, he returned to his own cave. He called for a disciple and said, "Do you have the letters from the north?" The disciple hurriedly said, "They have already been prepared." As he spoke, he respectfully handed over a stack of letters. Lin Xiaofeng took them and carefully read through them one by one. They recorded what Zhang Yan had done in the past few days. Because Daoist Fu was originally a disciple of the Crossing Dust sect, the talisman naturally flew back to the sect after he was killed. This attracted Lin Xiaofeng's attention. However, because Daoist Fu had violated the sect's rules, he fled to the North Continent to hide. His status as a disciple of the sect had long been taken away, but he didn't return with the talisman. Even after Lin Xiaofeng found out about this, he didn't plan to stand up for him. He pondered for a while and thought to himself, this person's methods are similar to those outsiders from 1,000 years ago. They should be the same. Looking at his cultivation, he should be someone who has cultivated a Dharmakaya. There must be a reason why he came to obtain the earth chi. Maybe it's for the elephant realm mentioned in the ancient books. My plan might fall on this person. The reason why he set his eyes on Zhang Yan was because in the past few days, although there were many cultivators from beyond the heavens who came to the Black Heron continent, Zhang Yan was the only one who had entered the third-degree realm. Moreover, Zhang Yan's methods were not fierce, so he felt that he could try to plan something with him. After thinking about it, he warned his disciple, "I have something important to do and need to go out. If sect master wants to find me, tell him that I'm out gathering herbs. If it's urgent, you can send a talisman to find me." The disciple nodded. Lin Xiaofeng stood up and thought to himself, sect master's senior brother must have the same plan as me, but he has too many misgivings and doesn't dare to make a move. Let me go first. I hope this trip goes smoothly and I can find the opportunity to leave this world. Chapter 877. Lin Xiaofeng left the sect and traveled for half a month before arriving at the North Continent. The Crossing Earth sect was the #1 sect in the Xianlu continent. If it was in the past, an elder of his status would have alerted the other sects along the way. However, he deliberately concealed his tracks this time and flew close to the ground in the wilderness. Thus, no one noticed him along the way. He did not directly find Zhang Yan. Instead, he found a place with abundant earth-yin qi. After subduing the demon guarding the mountain, he stopped and waited for the other party to arrive. After about 10 days or so, he suddenly felt something and came out of his meditative state. He looked up and saw a streak of light flying over from afar. In just a few breaths, it was already in front of the mountain. The speed was so fast that it could be said to be unprecedented. His expression turned solemn. He stood up and stared at the sky. For thousands of years, all the cultivators from beyond the heavens rode on sword lights. They are very similar to this person. It seems that my previous guess was correct. Although the letter described Zhang Yan's situation, he did not see it with his own eyes. Thus, he still had some doubts. Now that he saw it, he no longer had any doubts. When the sword light came closer, he cupped his fists and said, "Are you a fellow cultivator from outside the heavens? Lin Xiaofeng of the Crossing Earth sect greets you." In the sky, the sword rays stopped and dispersed. Zhang Yan appeared and looked down. He saw that the person who spoke was a Daoist who looked to be around 30 years of age and had an extraordinary appearance. After he killed Daoist Fu, he paid some attention to the matters of the Crossing Earth sect. When he heard the other party introduce himself, he knew that the person who came was one of the 3 elders of the sect. However, he had a slight smile on his face. It did not seem like he came to take revenge for his disciple. He nodded and returned the greeting. "Greetings from Zhang Yan of the Qinsang sect. So it's Daoist Zhang." Lin Xiaofeng had never heard of the Qinsang school. However, one thing was clear. To be able to reach the 3 stages of yuanying required countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures. It was impossible for a random cultivator to reach such a stage. Therefore, the other party must be from a large sect with a deep background. Zhang Yan asked. Fellow Daoist Lin called out to I. "What is it?" Lin Zhaofeng's expression turned solemn as he stepped forward and clasped his hands, saying, "Our sect once had a disciple by the name of Fu Changyi. This man is cunning and cruel. He killed his fellow disciples and stole our sect's ancient books before escaping. My Duqin sect has already expelled him from the sect, but I was unable to find his whereabouts for a while. When I heard that he was eliminated by Daoist master, I was overjoyed and came here to express my gratitude." Zhang Yan smiled calmly. If that manual was the one in Daoist Fu's hands, however, it wasn't some top-notch cultivation technique, and it wasn't worth a Yuanying third-stage cultivator to pursue it for tens of thousands of miles. Most likely, this person had other motives for coming here. But since he had already used this as an excuse, there was no harm in continuing the conversation and finding out what his real motive was. He said, "I found several items on Priest Fu's body. It originally belonged to your esteemed sect, so it's just nice to return it to its rightful owner." With a wave of his sleeve, he used his magic power to wrap up the few pages of the Daoist book and the Jade Scroll and sent them over. After Lin Zhaofeng received them, he read through them and looked as if he had really retrieved the sect's most precious treasure. His face revealed a joyful expression as he carefully kept them and cupped his hands, saying, "Thank you, fellow Daoist. Now that I've managed to retrieve the ancient books from my sect, I'm willing to host a banquet to express my gratitude. I hope that fellow Daoist will come and not refuse." Zhang Yan smiled, "Since fellow Daoist has invited me with sincerity, I will naturally agree." Lin Zhaofeng revealed a joyful expression as he pointed to a high cliff above and said, "Tonight, Bai Su will be in charge of the sky. Why don't we go up there and enjoy the beautiful scenery together?" Zhang Yan readily agreed. After being in the small realm for more than half a month, he knew that there were no sun, moon, or stars here. There were only the golden trace, scarlet serpent, and, Bai Su, light clouds that crisscrossed the vault of heaven. They blew out the yang smoke and breathed in and out the cold. They each took turns to be in charge of the sky, and everything in the small realm depended on them to survive. However, when the two of them rode the wind and arrived at the top of the cliff, there was suddenly a strange pine tree that stuck out from the crevice below. It held up its crown like a lid, its trunk was vigorous and its appearance was extraordinary. There was spiritual essence coiled within its old roots and clear air floated around its branches and leaves. It was obvious that it had already matured. Lin Zhaofeng looked at Zhang Yan and asked, "What does Jinren think?" Zhang Yan didn't mind and said, "This place is very good, there's no need to change." Lin Zhaofeng smiled and said, "This old tree actually got lucky." He walked a few steps into the cliff and found a flat area. He gently waved his sleeve and in an instant, spiritual light flowed out like water and spread out over 100 feet. It was actually a big scarlet-red cloth. Then, jade tables, jade stools, fresh vines, and tender branches floated out. At this moment, there was the sound of flowing water. A clear spring gushed out and surrounded the table. Basin after basin of flowing water flew out and were placed on the table one by one. In an instant, hundreds of steaming hot fragrant dishes landed on the table. Not a single one of them wasn't a delicacy. In the golden light and jade cups, there was even grape juice and coconut juice. The fine wine made one drunk just by smelling it. Lin Zhaofeng laughed and gestured, saying, "Please." Zhang Yan cupped his hands, waved his sleeves and walked to the table to sit. Lin Zhaofeng waited for him to sit down before he also sat down. He clapped his hands and shouted, "Who is in charge here?" As soon as he said that, an ape jumped down from the cliff and crouched down, saying, "This little demon puppet is the leader of the hundreds of beasts in the mountain. I wonder what orders Jinren has for me." Lin Zhaofeng said without any politeness, "Today I'm hosting an important guest. Go to the mountain and call a few agile ones to come and serve me." The ape said, "Jinren, please wait for a moment. This little demon will be back soon." Lin Zhaofeng said, "Do well, you'll get your share." The ape turned and jumped down the cliff. After a while, two green-feathered parrots flew over and landed on the ground. They turned into two shy and charming women with limpid eyes. They came up and bowed, saying, "My sister and I heard from Elder Yuan that a celestial master is coming, so we came to serve you." Lin Xiaofeng grunted. The two women were obedient and didn't dare to say much. They came up to pour wine for the two and quietly waited on the side. Zhang Yan smiled and asked, "Are the monsters in the North Continent also under your sect's control?" Lin Xiaofeng said, "Beasts, birds, grass, trees, fish, and insects are all living beings in the world. My sect has the teachings of our founding master. If you're willing to be ordered around by my Crossing Earth sect and are sincere, you can become a disciple and pass down your cultivation methods and divine arts." Zhang Yan grunted and said, "Fellow Taoist, so your sect isn't afraid of demons seeking Tao. May I know the name of your founding master?" Lin Xiaofeng said, "My founding master's Tao title is Bo Xiang. I wonder if fellow Taoist Zhang has heard of him." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "So you're from Jinren Bo Xiang's lineage. No wonder your sect controls a region." This Jinren Bo Xiang was one of the few almighty people who opened the world in the ancient times. There was also a rumor about this Jinren. It said that he wasn't a human. The so-called Xiang was a big fish in the mysterious sea. Because he was a demon, he took in many different species as his disciples. Lin Xiaofeng toasted Zhang Yan and asked, "May I know which Shinren's orthodoxy is your sect?" Zhang Yan put down his wine cup and said, "My Qinsang school is the orthodoxy passed down by the great underworld founding master." Lin Xiaofeng was surprised and said with respect, "So you're under the great underworld founding master." No wonder. Since they were both disciples of the profound sect, the estrangement between them was slightly reduced. After drinking for a long time, Lin Xiaofeng felt that the time was right and asked, "I heard that fellow Taoist Zhang is looking for the earth-in essence. May I ask, what is the use of it?" Zhang Yan said frankly, "There's nothing I can't say. If this qi is compatible with the heaven's essence, and if a cultivator has a strong foundation, it can help them enter the elephant realm." Although Lin Xiaofeng knew that there was a way after the third realm, he had never seen anyone succeed. Now that he heard it from Zhang Yan, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh and said, "The ancient books are indeed true." He thought for a while and stood up. He bowed deeply to Zhang Yan and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, I have a request." Zhang Yan also stood up and took half a step back. He said calmly, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, if you have something to say, you can say it." Lin Xiaofeng looked up and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, I'm very envious of you outer realm cultivators. At least you can see the path ahead. It's a pity that we're trapped in this world. No matter what we do, we can't take half a step out. If you have a way to help us get out, I'll do my best to thank you." Zhang Yan thought for a while and said indifferently, "This matter is too important. It can't be decided with just a few words. Let I think about it." Lin Xiaofeng thought that Zhang Yan was trying to evade him, but he was a little anxious. He took a deep breath and said, "Fellow Taoist, my Crossing Earth sect knows where the qi in this continent is abundant and where the qi in this continent is sparse. I'm willing to show you the way." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. This person was waiting for him in this mountain, so he had clearly told him that he had the ability to do so. If he could really help, then it would save him a lot of effort to gather the earth qi. He changed his mind. If he wanted to bring these people out, the Qinsang school's talisman couldn't do it, but the Shaoqing sect's talisman could still be used. He could go and borrow it. His silence made Lin Xiaofeng think that the conditions weren't good enough, so he said, "If fellow Taoist thinks it's suitable, as long as you can really bring us out, my Crossing Earth sect is willing to give up our sect." Zhang Yan looked over in surprise. The Crossing Earth sect was located in the territory of Shanghua sect over 1,000 years ago. The reason why both sects built their sect here was because the core transformation peak was the place with the densest spiritual qi in this realm. Even if he absorbed the earth qi from hundreds of spiritual mountains, he might not be able to compare to this place. So he asked seriously, "Fellow Taoist Lin, can you make the decision?" Lin Xiaofeng said without hesitation, "Of course I can make the decision. I can sign a contract." He knew that those cultivators from beyond the heavens would come to the Crossing Earth sect sooner or later after searching for the spiritual chi everywhere. Since he had to give it up anyway, he might as well take the initiative to give it to someone. That way, not only would he owe them a favor, it would also look better on his face. Zhang Yan nodded solemnly and said, "If that's the case, please wait a moment, fellow Taoist." For a realm like the core transformation peak, Yu Xiao would definitely have his eyes on it. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he coveted it a long time ago. Although he didn't care, he needed to inform the sect in advance. So he took out a pen and paper, wrote a letter, and sent it to the sky. After a little less than half an hour, a letter flew back. He caught it and looked at the handwriting and seal. They were all left by Sun Jinren. In the letter, he was warned that he could do whatever he wanted and must retrieve the earth chi. As for the talisman to enter and exit the small realm, they would naturally send someone to borrow it from Shaoqing sect. However, he was reminded to be extra careful and not be careless. Chapter 878. After a while, Lin Xiaofeng and Zhang Yan excitedly returned to the Crossing Earth sect. After returning to the sect, he didn't stop and immediately went to the main hall to greet the sect master, Yin Zhaokong. After waiting outside for a short while, he was called in. When he saw Yin Zhaokong, he didn't conceal anything and told Yin Zhaokong everything that had happened. In the end, he said, "Senior brother, this is our chance. As long as fellow Taoist Zhang is willing to lend us a hand, then our Crossing Earth sect's 1,000+ disciples will have a chance to escape this cage." Yin Zhaokong sighed, "Junior brother is too rash." Lin Xiaofeng laughed, "Senior brother, are you talking about the calamity in the outer realm?" Yin Zhaokong looked at him and said, "Oh. Fellow Zhang didn't hide this matter." Lin Xiaofeng said, "Of course. Taoist Zhang has already warned us. However, I have something to say. If the outer realm is calm and there are no calamities or tribulations, we will not have such a fortuitous encounter." He chuckled. "My senior brother and I only have a few hundred years left to live. Even if we enter the Tao in our next lives, we will still be trapped in this world. If we can go beyond the heavens, even if we die, I will be willing." Yin Zhaokong took out a letter from his sleeve and pushed it forward. He said calmly, "Go take a look." Lin Xiaofeng was surprised. He picked it up and his body trembled slightly. "Yuxiao School." Yin Zhaokong said, "This Yuxiao School sent an envoy to us a long time ago. They want us to submit to them and help the Crossing Earth sect escape. However, I suspect that they want to use the Crossing Earth sect to block the calamity. I don't want to offend them, so I haven't replied yet." Lin Xiaofeng raised his head and frowned, "Senior brother. I heard from fellow Zhang that Yuxiao School is one of the 3 big sects in the continent. However, most of the sects are controlled by Xianmen aristocratic families. Even if I go, I won't be able to gain a foothold." Yin Zhaokong shook his head, "What happened is only one side of the story. As the sect master, I have to plan for the disciples. My original intention was to wait for the best offer and choose among the cultivators from beyond the heavens. After all, no one knows what the outside world is like. No one knows, but with Junior Brother's actions, this matter can only be tied to that Taoist Zhang. You are being controlled by others." Lin Xiaofeng had already sworn an oath. He had done this on purpose. He knew very well that if he didn't do this, it was impossible to force this sect leader Shixiang to make a decision. Yin Zhaokong stood up and walked several steps, as if he was thinking. After a long while, he said, "I can't make a decision on this matter alone. Go and call junior brother Zhaoyue over to discuss it together." Lin Xiaofeng said, "That is only natural." He summoned the disciple from outside the hall and gave him a few instructions. The disciple bowed and left. A short while later, Mo Zhaoyue entered the hall and loudly said, "Sect Master Shixiang, why have you called little brother here?" Seeing Yin Zhaokong sit down on the praying mat, Lin Xiaofeng recounted what had happened once again under Yin Zhaokong's indication. After Mo Zhaoyue heard this, he was stunned for a long time. Then he suddenly jumped up and roared, "Junior brother, how can you agree? Isn't this child's play? Lin Xiaofeng had already expected this reaction and said seriously, Senior brother, we should be decisive. If we hesitate, our Crossing Earth sect will never be able to rise again. Mo Xiaoyue angrily said, I don't care what you want to do. Leave or stay. If you want to leave, I won't be able to stop you. But the foundation passed down by our ancestors cannot be abandoned in our hands. Lin Xiaofeng snorted and said, strictly speaking, Huandan Peak is the Shanghua sect's mountain. Senior brother's words are not appropriate. Mo Xiaoyue was clumsy with words and didn't know how to refute. He waved his hand and said, I can't win against you in an argument, but I will not comply with this matter. Senior brother, you and junior brother can leave. But as long as I am here, no one can take away the earth chi from the mountain. Lin Xiaofeng knew that this senior brother of his was stubborn. If he couldn't convince him, then he would really stay here. Lin Xiaoyue sighed and said, I once swore in front of Daoist Zhang that if senior brother doesn't yield, then you will have to pay with your life. Mo Xiaoyue was stunned and didn't know what to do. Yin Zhaokong said in a low voice, Junior brother Mo, you can invite that Daoist Zhang to visit. I want to meet with him. Lin Xiaofeng said, that is easy. I originally wanted to invite Daoist Zhang, but he is in the North Continent collecting earth chi and can't leave for the time being. I will go to him later. Yin Zhaokong said, then let's do it. Lin Xiaofeng, seeing that things were developing in the direction he wanted, was excited. He stood up and was about to leave when he suddenly remembered something. He asked, Head senior brother, do you know where the eroded script fragments that senior uncle left behind are? Yin Zhaokong didn't know why Mo Xiaofeng was looking for these things, but it wasn't something important, so he didn't ask. He simply replied, after the Xian character vault, in the third pavilion. Lin Xiaofeng cupped his hands and bowed to the two. Mo Xiaoyue was still angry, but he turned around and pretended not to care. He smiled and turned to leave the hall. North of the Xuanlu continent. 10 days passed in a flash, and Zhang Yan had already collected most of the earth chi in the mountain. He put Yan Zhujing's bottle into his sleeve, and after a short rest, he rode on the strong wind and soared into the clouds, heading towards the mountain gate of the Duqin sect. 2 days later, he arrived at the Gathering Dan Peak. He stood in the sky and was about to state his purpose. At this moment, the smoke-forbidden formation parted to two sides, and a long-bearded Daoist walked out with more than 100 people. He said, Daoist Zhang, I heard that you were coming. Yin Zhaokong has been waiting here for a long time. Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. This person was the head of the Duqin sect, but he didn't expect that not only did he personally come out to greet him, he even did it with such great fanfare. This was the etiquette of greeting the head of a sect. With another thought, he understood the intention. In the Donghua continent, there were many who had designs on Huandan Peak. The other party was using his reputation to prevent other sects from coveting it, and at the same time, to test his foundation. He smiled and said, I didn't expect that I's arrival would actually alarm the esteemed head of the sect. Yin Zhaokong said, Daoist Zhang is an honored guest of our sect, how can I be impolite? He turned to the side and gestured, Daoist Zhang, please. Zhang Yan nodded his head and walked forward. The two of them walked side by side into the mountain gate. At this moment, outside the mountain, a beautiful, bright, and heroic woman in white stood on a hill, and the two Mountly disciples who had entered the small world before were standing behind her. Other than them, there were also 3 disciples of the same generation. I didn't expect that the Duqin sect would actually come to greet Daoist Zhang. The woman in white thought for a long time and said, since Qinsung School wants this place, then we can only stop this time. A Mountly female disciple behind her bit her lip and said unwillingly, eldest senior sister, we have done so many things and promised so many benefits, are we just going to give up like this? The spirit point of Qinsung School is stable, why fight with us small sects? The woman in white waved her hand lightly and said, that's not true. The earth chi in this small world originally belongs to the 3 sections. There's nothing wrong with Daoist Zhang taking it, this isn't Dan Transformation Peak, we can just find another place. The other slightly older female disciple said, "Eldest senior sister is right, Taoist Zhang's Xian cultivation is unfathomable. It's not good to have enmity with him. Besides, we can't take the earth qi. The disciples of other sects can't take it either, so it doesn't matter." The woman in white said, "Junior sister Tai, I remember when Taoist Zhang's eldest disciple, Taoist Lu, returned to the mountain. Junior sister Chao specially sent someone to send him off, so that he could return safely." The female disciple said, "Eldest senior sister, that's true, but it's a pity for junior sister Chao." Sigh. The woman in white looked at the depths of Dan Transformation Peak and said, "With this favor, maybe there's still a chance for things to turn around." After a banquet in the Duqin sect, both the host and the guests left happily. Zhang Yan, on the other hand, was led to a good guest house for the night. Not long after he sat down, a disciple came in to greet him and handed him a sandalwood chest. He said, "Spiritual Master Lin has ordered this disciple to inform you that the items that Spiritual Master needs are all inside." Zhang Yan nodded, "Thank Taoist Lin on my behalf." The disciple said, "I will definitely bring it. Does Taoist Zhang have any other instructions?" Zhang Yan naturally had no other matters to attend to. Just as he was about to speak, he glanced to the side and saw a huge peak hanging in front of him. It was majestic and steep, but the spiritual vigor was extremely weak. Zhang Yan pointed to the peak and said, "May I know where that is?" The disciple looked and said, "That used to be the old site of the Shanghua sect. After the sect was destroyed 1,000 years ago, the sect leader thought that it was an ominous place, so he rebuilt the sect at the foot of the mountain. That place was long abandoned, and now there's only a pile of broken stone tablets and walls." When Zhang Yan heard this, he took note of it. He stared at it and said, "If I want to go there to take a look, will it violate the rules of your sect?" The disciple was startled, then said, "Of course not, but there's no beautiful scenery there, it's not a good place to go." Zhang Yan nodded. The fact that the Shanghua sect was able to prosper for thousands of years before the Crossing Earth sect showed that its history was not simple. Since it was so close to the Crossing Earth sect. Since it's so close, why not go there and take a look after it? He lightly waved his hand. The disciple understood, bowed and retreated. Zhang Yan opened the wooden box and took out the jade scrolls with the etched inscriptions. He looked at them and nodded in satisfaction. When he was chatting with Lin Zhaofeng, he mentioned the remnant of the etched inscriptions. Lin Zhaofeng thought it was his personal preference, but he did not dare to ignore it, so he sent all the inscriptions from other sects to him. Zhang Yan did not care which sect it came from, as long as it was an etched inscription, it must contain the mysteries of heaven and earth, and the more he saw, the better it would be for his understanding of Tao. He held one in his hand and carefully studied it. At the same time, the news that the Duqin sect had invited Zhang Yan to a banquet almost immediately reached the Yuxiao school. In the Xinheng Hall, Zhou Xian put down the letter and sighed, "We tried so hard to get what we wanted, but it was still taken by the Qinsang school. This Taoist Zhang is really good." Sitting below him was Daoren, an elder of the Zhou clan. He said, "This Zhang Yan's supernatural arts and techniques are shocking, and he is also the disciple of Zhou Chengju. If he gains power in the future, he will definitely harm our Yuxiao." Zhou Xian said, "I heard that he has entered the Qinsang school's Duzhen Hall. With this status, he is only slightly weaker than the enlightened Master Dong Tian. What can I do to him?" The elder said, "Zhang Yan entered to obtain the Qi of Essence and use it to achieve Tao. With his first-grade Dan, even if he took all the Qi of Huandan Peak, it might not be enough. In this case, I will not be able to take much, and I will definitely cause him some trouble." Zhou Xian was interested. "Senior apprentice brother, do you have an idea?" The elder stroked his beard and smiled, whispering, "Junior apprentice brother, you might as well spread the news. It would be best if that person in the middle pillar state knows about it. Maybe it will be useful." Chapter 879. In the Dragon Stream Cave of the Central Pillar Continent, a stream of spring water flowed out from the mountain walls. When it reached a low-lying area, it turned into a pool. The water was so clear that the bottom could be seen. A jade scoop floated in the pool. A few green leaves floated over and fell into the water, spinning slowly with the waves. Footsteps were heard as a young Taoist entered the cave. He wore a white Taoist robe and a sword hung on his waist. His eyes were bright and clear, and he looked like an otherworldly crane. He walked to the side of the pool and bent down to pick up the jade scoop. He scooped up a scoop of sweet spring water and poured it into his mouth. He wiped his mouth with his sleeves and found a green stone to sit down cross-legged. He started to circulate his Xian technique. A few hours passed in the blink of an eye. A voice came from outside the cave, "Senior apprentice brother, are you there? Little brother Jiao Yuanliang has something to ask of you." The young Taoist stopped his technique and said, "Junior apprentice brother, come in." A shadow moved and a young Taoist with a headscarf and a thick robe walked in. When he saw him, he cupped his hands and greeted, "Senior apprentice brother." The young Taoist looked at him and praised, "Junior apprentice brother, your mana has improved after your retreat." Jiao Yuanliang said, "I wonder when I can catch up to senior apprentice brother." The young Taoist smiled, "With your talent, if you focus on the same path, it won't be difficult for you to reach the third level in 200 years. However, it won't be easy to enter the cave." "I don't have such extravagant hopes." Jiao Yuanliang looked around and smiled, "Let's not talk about this. I'm here today for an important matter." The young Taoist said, "You won't come to my place if there's nothing important. Sit down and talk." Jiao Yuanliang did not stand on ceremony. He cupped his hands and sat at the side. "Senior apprentice brother, I heard that a few days ago, Yuxiao school took out the magical item to enter the realm and allowed their disciples to enter the small realm to collect earth spirits and yin qi." The young Taoist heard this and said calmly, "Once the calamity of earth comes, the spiritual vigor of the people will disperse. In order to stabilize the spirit cave, it was natural that they needed the qi of the earth. This was not something that was hard to predict. However, it was unknown what was the intention of the Jade Cloud sect. If it was to say that they were trying to buy people's hearts. But it doesn't look like it." Jiao Yuanliang moved closer, cupped his fists and said, "That's Yuxiao's business, we don't care about him. It's just that little brother received news yesterday that once this matter started, the Qinsang sect couldn't sit still anymore. Now, he has sent that Zhang Yan to the lower realm to gather qi." When the young Taoist heard this name, his expression changed. He lowered his head and thought for a while. Then, he smiled faintly and said, "Junior brother, can you tell me why you are here?" Jiao Yuanliang said, "Not only did Zhang Yan ruin Master's grand plan, he also caused Master to fall into Qin Mabai's scheme, losing a lot of his cultivation. Even junior martial brother Luo was captured because of him. Normally, he is under the protection of Qinsong, so he can't find an opportunity. Now that he has entered the small world, it is an extremely good opportunity. If senior brother makes a move." The young Taoist didn't wait for him to finish. He raised his hand and rejected, "Junior brother, you don't have to say any more. I might meet him in the future. But this isn't the time." In his eyes, fighting and killing were only used to protect Tao. Other than the Tao of immortality, he didn't care about anything else. As long as it didn't affect his cultivation, he wouldn't purposely look for anyone. Jiao Yuanliang wasn't discouraged. He said, "Since senior martial brother isn't willing to make a move, then forget it. But I can't help it. I want to make use of this opportunity to find this person." The young Taoist said calmly, "This Zhang Yan is a rare talent that only appears once in 1,000 years. With junior martial brother's cultivation, you are far from being his opponent. You will only be sending yourself to death if you go." Jiao Yuanliang seemed to be angry and said, "Senior martial brother, don't look down on me. Why don't I tell senior martial brother that I won't be going alone? I have invited a few Taoists, so I have some confidence. But the realm entry treasure is with senior martial brother, I wonder if you can lend it to me?" The young Taoist said, "Since you already have a plan, I won't stop you. If you die here, I won't stand up for you." When he finished, he stretched out his hand and an item flew up from the pool into his hand. He then shook his sleeves and sent it out. He said, "Although it isn't an important treasure, it is still a gift from my master. Don't lose it. Jiao Yuanliang's eyes were filled with excitement. He stuffed it into his sleeves and cupped his fists. Thank you, senior martial brother. The young Taoist closed his eyes again and didn't speak anymore. Jiao Yuanliang was smart and said, I won't disturb senior martial brother's cultivation. I will take my leave. After leaving the cave, he walked down the mountain. After walking for about 10 miles, a man with fair skin and a scholarly appearance came up to him. When he saw him, he hurriedly came up and said, Senior martial brother, how is it? Did big senior martial brother agree? Jiao Yuanliang smiled and said, don't you know big senior martial brother's temper? As long as it doesn't interfere with his cultivation, anything can be discussed. I just found an excuse and took it out. Just now, although he said that he was righteous and that he wanted to stand up for his fellow disciples, in reality, he never thought about going to the small world, and he didn't really want to compete with Zhang Yan. He had other intentions for getting the treasure. He also knew that LV Junyang might be able to see through his intentions. However, as long as it didn't interfere with LV Junyang's cultivation, he wouldn't care about it. The scholar said excitedly, since the treasure is in my hands, I will go and find him now. When he was about to turn around, he was grabbed by Jiao Yuanliang and said, Junior martial brother Huang, why are you in such a hurry? If Deng Zhongli knew that I got the treasure so easily, he might not be willing to give up the benefits he had previously. Let's leave him for a few days first. If he can't wait and come looking for us, that will be the best. The scholar said worriedly, what senior martial brother said is right, but if we are late, the earth chi will be taken away by the disciples of those sections. Jiao Yuanliang laughed and patted his shoulder. Junior martial brother, don't worry. Shaoqing sect took 4 to 5 years to get the essence chi back. The disciples of those sects aren't the host, how much can they get in just a few days? The scholar was a little embarrassed and scratched his head. I don't understand the situation and made senior martial brother laugh. Jiao Yuanliang laughed again and said, I will take care of the rest. Junior martial brother, you can go back first. The scholar bowed and said, I will take my leave first. Jiao Yuanliang returned to the cave dwelling and sat there for 8 days. During this period, he received no less than 6 flying letters. Seeing that the other party was really anxious from waiting, he finally replied with a letter. After another day, he got up and flew out of the cave dwelling. He traveled for more than 1,000 miles to the east and landed on a cliff that looked like a crane dancing. After waiting for 6 to 8 hours, a thin yellow smoke flew over from the horizon and landed in front of the cliff. From inside, a man with slightly red temples appeared. The Taoist with a beard like a halberd cupped his hands as he walked and said, Fellow Taoist Jiao, I have arrived as promised. Jiao Yuanliang also laughed and stood up. He also cupped his hands and said, Fellow Taoist Deng is indeed a trustworthy person. Taoist Deng chatted with him for a while and couldn't help but ask, Fellow Taoist, did you bring the item this time? Jiao Yuanliang said, Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. I have already brought the item, but when I took it out this time, my other junior martial brother noticed it. Taoist Deng knew his intention. He just wanted to get more benefits, so he immediately said loudly, How can I let fellow Taoists suffer losses? When I get the essence, I will give fellow Taoist another portion. Jiao Yuanliang said happily, If that's the case, if fellow Taoist thinks it's suitable, shall we establish the spell contract now? Taoist Deng nodded in agreement, the sooner the better. If we delay by a day, the essence will be much lesser. I can't bear to do that. The two of them were already prepared and immediately took out the spell contract. Both of them swore an oath with their essence blood. Jiao Yuanliang glanced at the spell contract and saw that there were a lot of things that could be done. However, he smiled in his heart and put it away without batting an eyelid. Obtaining the Earth-Een essence wasn't his real goal. The thing that his branch had been thinking about day and night was to return to Qinsang and help his master sit on the position of sect master. However, after the 4 beasts formation was broken, even the last chance was lost. Thus, he could only settle for the next best thing. He was thinking about how to establish a new sect. The 3 great tribulations before him were an opportunity. Once the spiritual energy dispersed, other than the 3 major sects, the remaining Taoist sects wouldn't be safe. As long as one of them fell, they could find a way to replace it. Therefore, when he heard that Yu Xiao opened the small world, the first thing he did wasn't to find trouble with Zhang Yan, but to disrupt the sect's fight for the essence. However, it was dangerous for him to do it himself. That was why he asked Taoist Deng to come. Taoist Deng was in a hurry to go to the small world. After establishing the spell contract, he said goodbye to Jiao Yuanliang and flew into the sky. He traveled thousands of miles to the north and arrived at a remote place. He circled the mountain several times and made sure that no one followed him. Only then did he descend into a cave in the belly of the mountain. Just now when he stepped inside, a disciple came up to greet him and said, "Master, did your trip go well?" Taoist Deng said, "This trip went well and I've obtained the magic treasure. I'll enter the small world in a few days. Remember, if I don't return, you mustn't go out, lest your martial uncles notice anything." The disciple said, "I know." Taoist Deng asked again, "How is Xiao Yang?" The disciple said, "He received a cultivation method from master and has been cultivating in seclusion behind the mountain these days." Taoist Deng nodded and said, "Keep a good eye on him." Even though Xiao Yang claimed to have obtained the inheritance left behind by a senior of my Nether Spring sect, his ability to cultivate to such an extent isn't the ability of an independent cultivator. There are many untruths in his words. The disciple said, "I've long seen that he's a suspicious person. Why don't we capture him and interrogate him? I'm not afraid that we won't be able to get the details." Taoist Deng shook his hand and said, "We can't make a decision now. You just need to keep him in check and don't let him go. I'll deal with this when I return." The disciple said, "Don't worry, master. I'll definitely take care of it." Taoist Deng reminded him, "I'll be gone for a few months at least and a year at most. When I'm not here, you need to cultivate diligently. Although I don't know Xiao Yang's background, he's about the same age as you and his cultivation level is higher than yours. You're my direct disciple. If you lose to him, you'll lose all my face." The disciple said in shame, "I'm slow-witted and let master down." Taoist Deng shook his head and said, "You're not slow-witted, but your mind is too clever and you've used it elsewhere. If you can focus, it won't be difficult for you to achieve something." After giving a few more instructions, he dismissed the disciple and walked into the depths of the cave. He activated the prohibition spell that he had set up beforehand and took out the talisman. When he stretched it out gently, a picture scroll was slowly unfolded and spiritual light and clouds gushed out. He knew that this talisman originally belonged to the Qinsang school. He didn't dare to open it completely because he was afraid of alarming the original owner. When he saw a little bit of spiritual vigor leaking out, he hurriedly jumped into it. When he looked up again, he saw another world. He looked at the surrounding landscape and thought to himself, "It's not the time for me to make a move yet. Why don't I hide now and wait for the people from Xianmen to gather the qi of the earth, then I'll rob them. This way, I can weaken Xuanmen's strength and save me a lot of effort." Chapter 880. Zhang Yan stayed on Huandan Peak for half a year. During this time, apart from polishing his cultivation, he spent most of his energy on understanding the path of erosion inscriptions. Yin Zhaokong saw that he was fond of reading the erosion inscriptions and thought that it was his hobby, so he ordered people to search for it. Whenever they found it, they would send it to him. Zhang Yan gladly accepted it. Although the erosion inscriptions could not improve his cultivation, it could allow him to explore some of the mysteries of heaven and earth. During this process, he gradually felt that the movement of his inner breath was smoother than before. This was not to say that there was something wrong with the original cultivation method. It was just that the 5 elements mysterious technique was derived from his own derivation, so it was inevitable that there would be some flaws. But this time, when he studied the erosion inscriptions, he was enlightened. The erosion inscriptions contained the understanding of the ancient cultivators on the Tao of heaven and earth. But because everyone had different understandings, even if it was about the same thing, it would not be written in the same way. But even so, there were similarities between them. He wanted to find the righteous path hidden in this place. Only then could he restore it to its original state. Obviously, the more erosion inscriptions he could read, the closer he would be to this goal. He thought to himself, it seems that this is the right path. But this is far from enough. I need to find more erosion inscriptions. He looked out. The land outside was vast and the mountains were undulating. The Xuanlu continent is a small world after all. It is not as vast as the 9 continents. Rumor has it that the 3 western continents were the source of the 9 continents' cultivators. Once this is over, I need to go there and explore. Maybe I will find something. In ancient times, the Donghua continent was covered in turbid air. Demons ran rampant, and there was even a Genin demon born there. It was a dark and dirty land. Although the North Darkstar continent was vast and full of spiritual opportunity, it was the territory of the Sky Demon. The South Cliff continent was full of poisonous insects and ferocious beasts. It was not a place for ordinary people to enter. As for the Middle Pillar continent, it was still a pillar that supported the sky. At that time, the high clouds had not gathered. The people on the ground could still see the stars in the sky. The 3 western continents were the peaceful shelter of the 9 continents' cultivators. The signs of prosperity were not inferior to the Donghua continent today. But for some unknown reason, it was not known. His inspiration was greatly diminished. The entire place had turned into a desolate place. As a result, the various sects traveled to the east and joined forces with the cultivators from beyond the heavens to slay the demons. In order to eliminate the vicious poison, he took the land of the 4 continents. Moreover, a few of the ferocious creatures that the great underworld ancestral master had sealed in the past were in these 3 continents. It didn't go against his original plan, and he could go there in the future. At this moment, a disciple came to report, Immortal Master Zhang, someone outside the mountain gate has delivered a letter. This person claims to be a fellow cultivator of the Xianmen sect. Zhang Yan thought for a moment. Since they were from the Xianmen sect, then they must be from the Donghua continent. He said, bring the letter in. The disciple carefully stepped into the inner room and respectfully presented a letter in his hand. Zhang Yan took a look and saw the 3 words, Shenzi written on the signature. He immediately knew the identity of the person who came. This woman was the eldest disciple of the Lishan sect. Ancestral Master Yuling had established the sect for thousands of years and had several disciples before. However, none of them could form a grotto heaven, and most of them had passed away. This Shenzi was the reincarnation of one of his original disciples. She once again entered the sect to cultivate Tao. She could be considered the first person of this generation. She was extremely powerful and had the highest chance of taking over the position of the second sect master. However, Jinren Yuling was afraid that it was not easy for him to teach a disciple that he liked. He was afraid that she would die, so he did not send her out for this Xianmen battle. In reality, it was not only the Lishan sect that did this. Because Butian sect, Pingda sect, and the other sects knew how powerful the 3 major trials were, they did not send out their eldest disciple to preserve their own strength. Only Huanjin sect fought to the death there. If not, an elder of the Netherworld Spring sect would not have stopped them halfway. He opened the letter and looked past a greeting and a description of the friendship between the 2 sections. He went straight to the main topic. Shenzi did not have any other intentions. She only asked if she could share some of the Earth-Een essence with the Lishan sect. Naturally, they did not extend their hands for nothing. As long as Zhang Yan was interested in anything in the sect, he could use it to exchange. In the end, she mentioned that a few disciples of the Xianmen sect had mysteriously disappeared. After investigating, there seemed to be disciples of the demonic sect. Hence, she specially informed him. Zhang Yan did not think that it was a problem to share some essence with the Lishan sect. Previously, Lu Yeni owed them a favor. The Duqin sect had a lot of Earth-Een essence. It was not a big deal to give them some. However, he was surprised that there were disciples of the demonic sect here. This small world could only be entered by relying on the treasures of the three sections. Yu Xiao and Shaoqing sects definitely had it in their hands. It was impossible for there to be any mistakes. The only possibility left was that there was a problem with one of the treasures that fell into the hands of that person. However, he did not know how it was related to the demonic sect. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. Shen Zixin was the eldest disciple of the sect, so she wouldn't speak carelessly without confirming it. This transcendent artifact had been lost for hundreds of years. If it had really fallen into the hands of a disciple of the devil sect, there was no harm in taking it back. Just as he was thinking, he heard the voice of a disciple outside. "Celestial Master Zhang, an elder from the upper hall has arrived. He said that the sect leader wants to see you." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. He knew that the Duqin sect had made a decision. He smiled and said, "I understand. Please wait for a moment." With a wave of his sleeves, he kept all the bamboo slips and inscriptions in his pouch. Then, he stood up and left the pavilion. He saw a white-bearded old Taoist waiting in front of the pavilion. Above him was a cloud as white as snow. Upon seeing him, the old Taoist bowed and said, "Celestial Master Zhang, please follow me." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Thank you." The two of them, one in front and one behind, flew toward the highest point of Huandan Peak. In a few dozen breaths, they arrived at the top of the cliff. The sect leader, Yin Zhaokong, Mo Zhaoyue, and Lin Zhaofeng were already waiting outside the hall. Such a courteous reception was not without reason. In the past, cultivators from beyond the heavens would occasionally come to Huandan Peak. However, ever since Zhang Yan arrived, they all stayed far away and no one dared to approach. From this, the Duqin sect knew that this person's identity in the outside world was not to be trifled with. The sect behind him must be extremely prosperous. This forced them to make a decision in advance. Zhang Yan walked forward and exchanged greetings with the three of them. After some small talk, they entered the hall together. After sitting down, they talked for a while. Under Yin Zhaokong's signal, Lin Zhaofeng cupped his fists and said, "Fellow Zhang, after our discussion, we have decided to give up Huandan Peak and move out of this world. As for the qi of earth under our feet, you can take it. Now that our sect is ready, I wonder if you have any suggestions." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Half a month ago, there was a reply from within the sect. However, we did not know what everyone's intentions were, so we did not take it out. Now that everyone has made a decision, we can make it clear. Now in the land of the 9 continents, there are 3 places for your sect to choose from." Mo Zhaoyue asked anxiously, "Which 3 places?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "First, you can go to the border between the North Underworld and the East Flower Continent. This place is close to my Qinsang. Other than being careful of the ferocious demons of the North, there is no big problem. Second, you can find a place in the open sea to settle down. There is a sect here that is on good terms with me. When we go there, we can take care of each other. As for the last place, your sect can go to another continent to find another cave abode. From then on, my Qinsang school will not interfere." Lin Zhaofeng was silent for a while. He looked at Yin Zhaokong and said, "Fellow Taoist, can you wait for a moment and allow us to discuss?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Of course, this is a big matter. Everyone can slowly discuss it." Lin Zhaofeng waved his hand and a disciple came up to the hall. He said, "Perfected Zhang, please." Zhang Yan stood up and bowed before following the disciple to the side hall. Yin Zhaokong pondered for a while and said, "Junior brothers, what do you think?" In the past few days, Lin Zhaofeng had also found out about the situation of the 9 continents from Zhang Yan. He already had a rough idea of the situation in the outside world. When he heard the sect leader's question, he immediately said, "Senior brother, the first place is north of Qinsang School. There are no small sects on the left or right. It looks carefree. However, once we land there, we will be blocked from both ends. There is no room for us to stretch out. I think it is not advisable." Yin Zhaokong said in a deep voice, "Junior brother has thought it through. I also think it is inappropriate. If we go there, it will be equivalent to becoming the northern border of Qinsang school. In the long run, it will be extremely disadvantageous to the sect. Lin Xiaofeng nodded his head and said, as for the second place, I think it can be used as a temporary foothold. Not to mention the vastness of the sea, there are also quite a number of spiritual objects, enough to provide for our sect's needs. It is also not far from the continent, and there are many strong enemies like the continent. If there is any danger, we can retreat at any time. Senior brothers, why don't you consider it? Yin Zhaokong thought for a long time and nodded in agreement. There is a great tribulation in the outer world. There is already chaos in the Donghua continent, causing the spirit cave to be unstable. Otherwise, there is no need to come to our world to borrow spiritual energy. However, the sea is different. Even without the spirit cave, we can temporarily stay in peace, so it is the first choice. If one did not want to become a second-rate sect, they must have a spirit cave. However, there was a fixed number of spirit caves in the Donghua continent. Now that the Great Tribulation had come, there was even less hope. However, if one wanted to establish a sect on the sea, there was no need to do so. For example, the Chongyuezhen temple did not have a spirit cave because the spiritual vigor on the sea was too scattered. They could only try their best to gather spiritual vigor within a certain area. After a few hundred years, when the spiritual vigor was exhausted, they would change to another area to establish the sect, and the cycle would repeat. Lin Xiaofeng said, "Senior brother is right. When the 3 disasters are over, it is not too late for our disciples to find a way to enter the continent." Although he said that he was not afraid of disasters, who would easily give up their lives. Of course, they would avoid it if they could. Mo Zhaoyue asked curiously, what about the last place? Why didn't junior brother mention it? Isn't it also free to go to other continents? Yin Zhaokong sighed, the sea is vast and there are endless dangers. We are already considered outsiders in the Donghua continent. If we go further, who knows what changes will happen? If there is one person in our sect who can reach the realm of elephant, we can give it a try. Otherwise, compared to the 2 places mentioned above, it is a bad idea. Lin Xiaofeng also said, there is no lack of martial arts in our sect. With senior brother's talent, when you go to the outside world and get rid of the shackles on your body, you might be able to try the upper realm. Mo Zhaoyue shook his head and said, it is just a pity about this Huandan Peak. Lin Xiaofeng knew that although he reluctantly accepted his words, he still held a grudge. He found it funny and did not say much to him. He only looked at Yin Zhaokong, who nodded. He called a disciple and said, go and invite Jinren Zhang over. Tell him that the 3 of us have decided. Chapter 881. After Deng Zhonglin entered the small world, he laid low for half a year and got a general understanding of the situation in Xianlu continent. Only then did he try to snatch the essence. Since he had planned everything carefully and sneakily every time, he had succeeded 3 times in a row, and the Yuanyang sect had suffered the most losses. The disciples of this sect borrowed Yuxiao's magic treasure to enter the small world and didn't want to go back and forth. They just wanted to collect all the essence and bring it out at once. If he gave away the essence as soon as he collected it, he wouldn't be able to get so much. One day, he used the underworld escape art and secretly followed 2 Li Mountain disciples to the vicinity of Huandan Mountain. He looked at the peak and thought for a long time, then shook his head. Zhang Yan is in Huandan Mountain. It's better to stay far away in case he notices me. I'll go find someone else. As time passed, Zhang Yan's battle achievements on that day were gradually known by everyone. Under the Devil's Lair, he had single-handedly suppressed 8 third-stage realm cultivators to the point that they were unable to retaliate. If Master Dong Tian didn't stop him, he would have been killed. He knew he couldn't afford to offend him, so he could only stay far away. Just as he was about to leave, he heard a soft voice. Since you're here, why are you in a hurry to leave? Shen Zixin. Deng Zhonglin was shocked. Ever since the Devil's Tribulation, he often went out to kill cultivators of Xianmen. He had met this woman a few times and knew that she was different from ordinary Li Mountain disciples. She had received the teachings of Master Yuling. Although he was confident that he could fight her, the timing wasn't right. This could be considered the territory of the Celestial Sect of Wonders. The other party only needed to calmly drag him here. When her fellow disciples came, they could easily kill him. Therefore, he didn't hesitate. He immediately used the underworld escape art and flew into the sky. He believed that with her escape art, she wouldn't be able to catch up to him. But suddenly, a fragrance filled his nostrils. Countless red rainbows bent, straight, or bent like colorful silk. Streaks of light streaked across the sky like flowers blooming and withering, rising and dying. His heart skipped a beat and he thought, oh no, it's the heavenly rainbow. Apart from Jinren Yuling, only 2 people in the Li Mountain sect were able to learn this supernatural power. It was rumored that it could conceal the heavenly gate. Forbidden Earth Door was specially used to trap people who were skilled in escape techniques. When cultivated to a high level, one could travel 1,000 miles in one go. Once one fell into it, no matter what kind of escape technique one used, they would not be able to use it. Although he had not reached that level yet. However, it was not difficult to restrain him. In a moment of desperation, he shook his body and his Taoist robe emitted strands of light. His body suddenly split into dozens of people and shot out like shooting stars. It flew in all directions at an extremely fast speed. Even flowing heavenly rainbow couldn't stop it. Shen Zixin looked up from midair and frowned slightly. The other party's methods were also brilliant. With just a glance, he could not tell which was real and which was fake. At this moment, she absolutely couldn't hesitate, otherwise, she would have no choice but to allow them to escape. In just a flash of thought, she made a decision. She raised her fair fingers and stretched out her hand to grab towards 2 different directions. The crimson rays of light in the sky suddenly shrunk inward and completely enveloped the 2 of them. However, she could not do anything about the last direction. She could only watch as the figure escaped and disappeared. With this divine power covering her, she knew that the other party was not captured by her. She shook her head and closed her fingers. There were several pieces of the Taoist robe in her hand. Just now, those incarnations were these. She focused and muttered to herself, golden cicada robe. This old devil has quite a lot of treasures. She felt that it was a pity. If her divine power was a little more profound, or if she had a few more talismans, the chances of capturing this person would be much higher. Li Mountain sect had been established for 1,000 years, but its foundation was not solid. Even though the eldest disciple of the sect had a few powerful talismans, they were mostly used for self-defense. They were not good enough for attacking. When the 2 of them fought, on Huandan Peak 1,000 miles away, Zhang Yan had already finished his discussion with Yin Zhaokong and the other 2 and came out of the main hall. Suddenly, he felt something and looked down from the peak. He saw a flash of red light with a strong qi. With one look, he knew that it was someone from Xianmen who was performing divine power and Taoist techniques. This level of qi seems to be from Li Mountain sect. He thought for a moment and drew a line with his finger. A talisman appeared out of thin air and took out the letter that Shen Zixin had sent. He caught a trace of qi that she had left behind and slapped it on the talisman. It turned into a stream of light and flew into the sky. Not long later, he saw a flash of light. It was the letter. He used his mana to hold it in his hand and opened it. It was Shen Zixin's reply. After reading it, he smiled and waved his sleeves. He went down Huandan Peak without any obstructions and left the Duqin sect's mountain gate. He then flew on his sword and headed south. After traveling for close to 1,000 miles, he saw a small hill below. A woman in white was standing on top of it. She looked valiant and formidable, her eyes were bright and her expression was dazzling. When she saw him coming over, she bowed from afar and said with a pleasant voice, "Greetings, fellow Taoist Zhang." Zhang Yan landed and raised his hand, "Greetings, Taoist Shen." Shen Zixin smiled and tidied her hair, "My daughter is worried about the sect." When I heard that you were willing to share your essence with me, I was excited and lost my composure. I took the liberty of asking you to come here for a discussion. I hope you don't blame me. Zhang Yan smiled and said, it's not easy for your sect. After I take the essence from Huandan Peak, I can share some with you. When Shen Zixin heard him confirm it, she felt relieved. She would be able to answer to him when she returned. Zhang Yan asked, just now, I saw the light and the spiritual qi was scattered. Did you fight with someone? Shen Zixin sighed, it's the devil sect cultivator mentioned in the previous letter. Just now, I was so close to capturing him, but in the end, I still let him escape. If my daughter had an escape technique like Daoist Zhang's, I don't think she would have missed. Zhang Yan's gaze sharpened and asked, where did this person come from? Did you investigate? Shen Zixin thought, this person knows the underworld escape art, so he should be from the Netherworld Spring sect. However, this person is good at hiding. I heard that my fellow Taoists tried to lure him out, but they never succeeded. Zhang Yan's mind raced. Before he collected qi, he needed to make sure there were no enemies around to prevent any accidents. Since the other party was from the demonic sect, even if it was just a small threat, he had to get rid of it. Moreover, the other party might have the talisman to enter the realm. If he could get it back, he would not owe Shaoqing a favor. Other than that, the sect would give him a credit. However, as the hall master of the Duzhen Hall, unless he entered the state of Grotto Heaven, he would not be able to advance any further. Therefore, any credit he got would not be of much use to him. However, it would not be difficult to ask the sect to temporarily give him the treasure. There was no lack of treasures in the Xuanlu continent. The disciples of the sect could come here to train, and it would be much better than the 9 continents that were in turmoil under the pressure of the 3 trials. With a plan in mind, he raised his head and asked, do you know where the other sects are collecting qi? Shen Zixin did not hide anything and told him. Zhang Yan asked around and found out that there was a lot of spiritual qi around Huandan Peak. Therefore, the disciples of the various sects were not far from each other. They were all within 1,000 miles of each other. After thinking for a while, he asked, just now, where did that person go? Shen Zixin said, when that person escaped, he went west. Zhang Yan nodded and handed over a talisman. He said, if you see that person again and need I's help, you can activate this talisman and I will rush over. After saying that, he bowed with a Dao salute, stood up, and flew towards the west. Shen Zixin looked at the direction he flew and was surprised. She thought, is Zhenren Zhang going to chase after the cultivator from the demonic sect? But this person is already far away and is good at hiding. How can I catch up with him? After Deng Zhonglin escaped for a few hundred miles, he was relieved when he saw that no one was chasing after him. Just now, if not for his good luck, he would have been trapped by the other party. He took out a porcelain bottle and shook it gently. He thought, although I have found a lot of spiritual qi, it is still less than half. According to what I have now, I have to plunder another 3 to 4 times before I can go back and refine treasures. Although he was in the 3rd realm, he only had a Dharmakaya. He used many good items to barely make it, so he did not have much hope for the Grotto Heaven. He came to plunder the qi of the earth in hopes of exchanging it with his fellow Taoists for an item that could increase his lifespan. He thought about it. The Lishan sect was already on their guard and it was not good to go forward. The Yuanyang disciples were always in pairs and it was not easy to kill them. The Taihao and Nanhua sects mostly went together. The Huanzhen temple specialized in restraining the demonic sect. He did not want to go against them. The only one that was convenient to attack was the Pingdu sect. The disciples of the Pingdu sect mostly used the Dharma spirits to fight. As long as he secretly found out what Dharma spirit it was, it would not be difficult to deal with it. Thinking about this, he regained his composure and used the netherworld escape technique. He carefully walked towards the place where the disciples of the Pingdu sect were. A few days later, he arrived at the place. He looked from afar and saw that the spiritual vigor was moving towards one direction. It was obvious that someone was casting spells to absorb the qi of the earth. He knew that he had found his target. However, the disciples of the Pingde sect did not have much combat power before they reached the third realm of Yuanying. However, once they entered this realm, their Dharmakaya and Dharma spirit would merge. Not only would their mana increase, the power of their supernatural Tao techniques would also be much stronger than before. Hence, he did not dare to be careless. He looked around and found a hidden valley. He sat down and started to meditate. After half a day, he felt that his spirit was full. He shouted and his body turned into yellow smoke. He followed the Dharmakaya and gradually disappeared without a trace. He circled around outside and saw an old Taoist with white eyebrows and a straight back at the peak of the mountain. He was holding a bottle in his hand and absorbing the earth chi. From the looks of it, he should be at the final juncture. There were 2 disciples not far away. They looked alert and it was obvious that they were protecting him. Deng Zhonglin recognized that the other party was an elder with the surname Wu from the Pingde sect. He could not help but feel happy. He knew the background of this person's Dharma spirit. He was one of the 18 city masters of the Pingde sect. His name was Dawn Revered Spirit. In terms of combat power, he was considered one of the top among his peers. If they were to fight face to face, it would be difficult to determine the winner in a short period of time. If it was a surprise attack, he would have a high chance of winning. As for the 2 disciples, they had just entered the Yuanying realm. It seemed like they had not been bestowed Dharma spirits. Hence, they did not need to look at him. He laughed and immediately pounced forward. Chapter 882. P.S. There will be more tomorrow. The storage bottle in Elder Wu's hand began to tremble. It was a sign that the essence chi was about to be filled. Looking at the mountains and rivers below, he couldn't help but reveal a satisfied expression. He thought to himself, this place is full of earth chi. If I use more force, I should be able to get another 3 to 5 bottles. Many of the people from the sects had the same idea as him. Because they weren't the masters of this place, they all wanted to take as much essence chi as they could. If they could take all of it, that would be the best. As for whether or not this would cause them to lose their roots, they didn't care. But even so, due to the limitations of his mana, he was powerless against the essence chi in the depths. He could only look and sigh. Elder Wu closed the storage bottle in his hand. When he was about to take out another one, a huge pressure suddenly enveloped his body. He was shocked. Heaven and earth seal. At the same time, a cold intent was rapidly approaching where he was standing. Because it happened so suddenly, he didn't have time to react. Luckily, an incense burner-like treasure in his sleeve sensed that its master was in danger. With a buzz, it flew out first and spat out a cloud of white smoke that covered his body. Elder Wu only felt that the smoke was surging, as if it was blocking something. Taking a closer look, he saw a sparkling and translucent dagger that was even smaller than an ordinary person's palm floating in the air. Looking at its direction, it was actually heading straight for his head. It was less than 3 feet away, just a little bit away from stabbing him. He was instantly furious. However, when he looked outside, his expression couldn't help but change. His body was already surrounded by no less than 100 demons. There was no space for him to escape. Ever since cultivators were robbed of their essence chi, he had thought that he might encounter such a situation. Therefore, he was still calm in the face of danger. Now that he thought about it, he understood that the other party wasn't doing this to kill him, but to temporarily trap him. Since that was the case, they must have prepared many methods to wait there. Therefore, he couldn't do as he wished. He took out a spell and used a reverse spell to remove the heaven and earth seal. Then, his mana rose. A gust of wind appeared out of nowhere. With a whoosh, it swept up 2 disciples not far away and sent them far away. Then, he said loudly, I have a treasure to protect me. I can still hold on here. Quickly go and find the Taoists of Xianmen to help. He didn't use a sound transmission technique. He said it out loud. This was done on purpose so that the intruder could hear him. If the intruder was distracted to deal with his 2 disciples, then this gap would be enough for him to counterattack. If he ignored it, that was also in line with his intentions. It would be best if he could find helpers, but if not, at least he could protect his disciple. Deng Zhonglin saw everything he did clearly, but he only smiled strangely and did not stop him. The nearest cultivator from the celestial sect of wonders was hundreds of miles away. There was no extreme heavenly astral wind to borrow in this small world. Without waiting for the two cultivators to return, he could take care of this Daoren. Doing so would give the other party some hope, and it would also prevent the other party from going all out in despair. He waved his hand in high spirits in the sky, and more than 100 devils immediately rushed forward. Elder Wu roared angrily, and his body suddenly jumped up a bit. A scarlet brilliance could be seen enveloping his entire body, as if he was wearing a layer of glazed golden armor. There was even a blurry figure of a spirit general behind him. Circles of hot flowing fire revolved above his head, dyeing the entire valley in a golden red color. From afar, it looked like the scorching sun was shining brightly, and its aura was extremely oppressive. He looked hatefully at his opponent who was watching the battle from a mile away. He felt helpless in his heart. The other party was obviously an old hand. He hid so far away, making it impossible for him to use his divine arts. When the devils rushed up and encountered the fire, they suddenly cried out, as if they were in extreme pain. They all retreated, and did not dare to get too close. They only circled about 10 feet away, as if they were looking for a place to attack. When Deng Zhonglin saw this, he snorted. In the Netherworld Spring sect, he was not a disciple of any cave, nor was he a direct disciple, so he did not practice the illusory thousand-spirit calamity water. However, these 100 devils had been refined by him for thousands of years, and they were known as the heart-refining poison devil. Not only were they not afraid of magic treasures and flying swords, they could also charm the mind, and cause the enemy to lose their will. However, the spiritual fire contained in this Dawn Spirit Venerable could precisely damage them. But that was all. If it could really kill the devils, he would have rushed out in one go, and there would be no need to defend where he was. Moreover, squandering the spiritual fire like this consumed an extreme amount of mana, and he definitely could not last long. As expected, after 100 breaths, the spiritual fire on Elder Wu's body gradually faded. However, his expression was still calm, and he once again took out the incense burner. It released wisps of green smoke, but it was thicker than the white fog just now. Even though it could not hurt the devils, it could still protect him. After a dozen breaths, the green smoke gradually dissipated. However, he calmly took out a jade basin from his sleeve. He raised his hand and grabbed it, pulling out a rainbow of light that enveloped his entire body. The devils surrounding him still could not do anything to him. In the next moment, Elder Wu took out protective magic treasures one after another, as if there were endless magic treasures hidden in his sleeve. Deng Zhonglin laughed coldly in his heart. This person was a third-stage cultivator, after all. He did not expect to kill him in one blow. As long as he firmly grasped the overall situation, and patiently destroyed all of the opponent's tricks, he would naturally become the final winner. No matter how many magic treasures he had, he still needed mana to support them. Under such continuous pressure, at most another moment, his mana would be exhausted. This was like a slow fire, but it saved a lot of energy compared to fighting head-on. Even if someone really came out to disturb the situation, he could easily retreat since he had the upper hand. Elder Wu knew what he was planning, but he did not have a good way to deal with it. He made this calm and unruffled posture to make his opponent anxious, which would make it easier for him to find flaws. However, his opponent was more patient than he imagined. At this moment, the magic treasure he took out was his last magic treasure. He would have to fight the devils head-on, but he had used up a lot of his mana, and he had no confidence that he could defend himself. He could not help but feel a little anxious, and he could only hope that his two disciples would bring his fellow cultivators here quickly. Very quickly, the magic treasure in his hand dimmed, and he suddenly felt a pair of eyes staring at him like a venomous snake. He sighed. Because he had used up too much mana, he had lost the chance to fight with his life on the line. He could not help but feel a little regretful. If he had fought with his life on the line, he might have had a chance to turn the situation around. Now, he could only close his eyes and wait for death. At this moment, he also made up his mind. He suddenly took out the storage bottle, raised it high in his hand, and said, "Fellow cultivator, you just want to take the essence. If you stop now, I am willing to give you half of it. If you continue to force me, I will immediately break it." After the earth in Qi left the mountains and rivers, once it dissipated, it could be collected again. It was mixed with a lot of impurities, and the effect was less than 10 or 20% of the original. Deng Zhonglin acted as if he did not hear it and continued to control the devils, and his attacks did not stop. Seeing that he was not moved at all, Elder Wu was stunned at first, and then he revealed a look of anger. With red eyes, he shouted, "Fine. Then don't even think about going." With a cracking sound, he crushed the bottle, and the huge amount of essence it contained suddenly exploded. However, to his surprise, among the surrounding devils, one of them suddenly exploded and turned into a leather bag full of golden fur. It immediately swallowed the essence. Because it happened in an instant, Elder Wu and the others wanted to stop it, but half of it had already been absorbed. His expression suddenly became extremely ugly. Deng Zhonglin laughed out loud. Since he had used the trick of slowly advancing, how could he not consider the opponent's possible reaction? He had also encountered a similar situation when he robbed the essence earlier, so he had already come up with a way to deal with it. After a few breaths, he squinted his eyes and saw that Doran's complexion was dispirited, and the spiritual light around him was extremely weak. He had no strength to resist. With a loud shout, the group of devils rushed forward again, one after the other, and fell into a fight for food. At this moment, something seemed to flash in the corner of his eyes, and he saw a spiritual light flying into the sky. It was Elder Wu's original spirit escaping. He snorted and did not care about it anymore. Because the Dharmakaya of the Pingdu sect's third-degree realm cultivator and the Dharmakaya were connected, after they were killed, the Dharmakaya would also take the original spirit away. Unless the Dharmakaya was destroyed, no one could stay. As long as the pagoda in the Pingdu sect was not destroyed, the Dharmakaya could not be killed. Therefore, he did not want to waste such a useless effort. The spiritual vigor of a Yuanying third-degree realm cultivator's Dharmakaya was not to be underestimated. After the devils swallowed Elder Wu, they all benefited, and all of them grew a lot stronger. Deng Zhonglin waved his sleeves and all the devil generals dispersed. He gently waved his hand and summoned the sleeve pouch that had fallen on the ground. He channeled his transcendence energy into it and wiped away the blood essence on it. Then, he entered the pouch and took a look inside. There were 5 cheese storage vases inside. He could not help but be surprised. There was more essence than he had imagined. Counting all that he had on hand, he had collected enough. Therefore, he could leave this place today and return to the sect. However, at this moment, a strong feeling of danger suddenly arose in his heart. He suddenly turned around and saw a ray of sword light tearing through the air and leaping over from the horizon. At this moment, waves of sword whistles that sounded like ocean waves entered his ears. "Oh no, it's Xiang Yan." Deng Zhonglin was terrified, and he did not have the slightest will to fight. He turned around and leaped into a cloud of yellow smoke, disregarding everything else, and rushed into the sky. The devils were left behind, hoping that they could stop him. When Zhang Yan came over, he coincidentally met one of Elder Wu's disciples. After asking about the situation, he rushed over. However, it seemed that he was a step too late, and Daoran had already been killed by the other party. At this moment, hundreds of devils were rushing over. He glanced at them, and hundreds of sword rays separated from his body. Every ray accurately slashed and tore the devils in half. He did not even look at them, and his body emitted a ray of light as he chased after them. Deng Zhonglin knew that the underworld conveyance technique was not much slower than the sword conveyance technique, and he had a high chance of escaping. However, after flying for more than 100 miles, he felt that something was wrong. No matter what, he was still an enemy. After fighting for a while, he had used up a lot of mana. On the other hand, Zhang Yan was known for his strong mana. Even if he was safe for now, he would be caught sooner or later. Fortunately, the underworld conveyance technique was not only fast, but it could also allow him to pass through the soil and rocks. He immediately turned and plunged into the ground. Chapter 883. In the blink of an eye, Deng Zhonglin sank into the ground and used all his strength to escape. Although the Yellow Springs escape technique allowed him to become invisible, if he were to pass through tangible objects, it would use up a lot of his spiritual energy. Thus, he was prepared to go deeper and find a river. Then, he would be able to use the most energy-saving method to escape. The sword light in the sky dissipated and Zhang Yan came out. He thought for a while. If he used the 5 elements escape technique, he would be able to travel underground without any problems. However, if he did that, he would not be able to catch up to this person within 2 to 4 hours. Thus, he reached out and used the heaven and earth locking technique. Then, he pointed with his finger and used the 5 elements escape technique. Not good. Deng Zhonglin suddenly felt his body sink. It was 10 times slower than before. He knew that he had been trapped by a forbidden technique. In his heart, he was extremely shocked. Just now, he saw the opportunity early and turned around to escape as soon as he saw the sword light. The two of them were at least 10 miles apart, but they were still enveloped by the restrictive lock technique. It could be imagined how great the fa of the person who cast the technique was. When he turned into smoke, he was unable to use any techniques. If he wanted to remove this technique, he would have to show himself. Immediately, the yellow smoke gathered and he returned to his human form. His spiritual energy spread out and instantly, all the mud and rocks around him disappeared. Then, he used the fastest speed to cast a counter spell to remove the restriction on his body. However, when he tried to use his escape technique again, a restrictive force descended upon him. This feeling was as if the surrounding soil was being grabbed along with his entire body, and it was about to be pulled out. The timing was extremely accurate. It was just as his spiritual energy was circulating and he was just a step away from success. Luckily, after he entered the small world, he had imagined that he would be surrounded and attacked by several cultivators from the mysterious sect. Although that wasn't the case, the situation was extremely similar. His mind moved and a golden lock flew out. With a "kacha" sound, it cracked open. His body suddenly stopped and he stopped his ascension. This was the origin lock. It could help him avoid danger once. However, the difference in spiritual energy between the two parties was not small. Thus, he couldn't escape. However, with this momentary delay, his magic power had already returned. Without hesitation, he used a concealment technique that only third-stage cultivators of the Netherworld Spring sect could learn. Immediately, a stream of essence chi shot out from his 5 apertures. It wrapped him up. He transformed into a wisp of smoke and flew away. This time, he used his techniques one after another. Divine arts, Dharma arts, and Dharma treasures were used one after another. Finally, he managed to break free from the shackles temporarily. However, he was not happy in his heart. Instead, he was secretly complaining. In a battle of magical powers between 2 cultivators, the one with the more powerful mana would have too much of an advantage. More often than not, a random Taoist technique or divine ability would force the other party to use all his strength to deal with it. And now, he had encountered such a situation. The only thing he could do now was to escape as soon as possible. Once he came face to face with Zhang Yan, he would have no hope of winning. Even if Zhang Yan attacked him purely with fa li, he would still be able to take care of him. Traveling underground was no longer feasible. The art of concealment could only last for 10 breaths, and the speed of escape was far inferior to the underworld escaping art. After the effect wore off, if the opponent used the same method just now again, what could he use to resist? Suddenly, an idea appeared in his mind. He gritted his teeth and said, "Whether it works or not, I can only give it a try. If I can make it there, I will be able to shake this person off." He immediately rushed upwards. After a breath's time, he was already on the ground. In this short period of time, Zhang Yan had already caught up. The distance between the two of them was less than 1,000 feet. Deng Zhonglin knew that he had wasted a lot of time. Once he showed himself, it would be extremely dangerous. So when he reached the surface, he didn't think and threw out a Dharma talisman. The light turned and a small mirror appeared. It shone on him. In an instant, he disappeared from where he was and escaped into the mirror world. The mirror light flipped, and under the illumination of the sky, it suddenly reflected a ray of light. In the blink of an eye, it was dozens of miles away. Deng Zhonglin staggered and fell out of the light. This was a Dharma talisman that he exchanged many precious materials from the origin Mirage Gate. There was a Taoist bewitching mirror true form left behind by a predecessor. Cultivators could borrow the light from the mirror to travel far away in an instant. This way, they could avoid certain Taoist techniques that couldn't be dodged. It was just that this technique was very harmful to the cultivator. If one's luck wasn't good, it was very likely that he would die in the blink of an eye. If it wasn't for this life and death situation, he wouldn't have used it. At this moment, even if he successfully used it, his face was distorted. His head felt heavy and his feet felt light. His body became blurred and was on the verge of collapse. Trembling, he took out a few pills and stuffed them into his mouth. Only then did he manage to stabilize his Dharma body. After taking a few deep breaths, he squeezed out the rest of his magic power and once again used the underworld escape technique to escape into the sky. About 200 miles ahead was the place where he fought the Yuanyang sect disciples. At that time, in order to guard against the one-thought sword, he specially set up 8 banners that he got from the Hunching sect. Each of the banners had the ability to take the place of death. However, he was also lucky that time. The 2 Yuanyang sect's third-stage cultivators were fighting with a Taoist from the Xianlu continent. Therefore, he didn't have to use it and succeeded. After that, he was afraid that people would surround and capture him, so he didn't take it back. At this moment, he wanted to use it to escape. Zhang Yan looked at the yellow smoke in the distance. If he used the Forbidden Lock magical ability, he would definitely stop his escape technique. With the opponent's speed, he could escape with this moment of delay. With a slight thought, he stopped his body. A trace of red and purple color flashed between his eyebrows. Suddenly, he let out a loud shout. Boom! Deng Zhonglin felt as if there was a loud clap of thunder in his ears. For a moment, the sky and earth were spinning, and the escape technique was almost broken. After a moment of absent-mindedness, he suddenly woke up and hurriedly tried to use the escape technique again. However, it was too late. The sword light behind him had once again caught up. It was just a simple shout. It was to erase all the previous efforts he had made. How could Deng Zhonglin not know that he had lost his last chance to escape? A fierce expression appeared on his face. He turned around and let out a strange cry. More than 10 bright lights appeared on his body. He actually took out all the magic treasures he had brought with him this time. He shouted, Taoist Zhang, wait. I have a magic treasure from your Qinsang school. If you can, however, when he looked up, he saw a huge hand that was more than 300 feet in size condensed from yellow smoke falling down. His expression suddenly froze, revealing a look of shock. The next moment, a loud bang came out. Endless smoke and dust rose, and then everything returned to silence. Under this blow, whether it was Deng Zhonglin or the magic treasure, both were smashed together. It didn't even cause the slightest ripple. Expressionless, Zhang Yan took out a magic talisman. Then, he captured a trace of qi from the scattered flesh and blood below. He pointed a finger into the talisman and gently threw it out. The talisman suddenly turned into a stream of light and flew in the southwest direction. He spread out his sleeves, riding on the strong wind, and followed. The treasure that entered the world definitely had its qi. If he searched for this talisman book, he would be able to find it. After traveling for a few thousand miles, he saw that the talisman book fell into an empty space and disappeared in the blink of an eye. He knew that this must be where the door was. However, looking at it from this small world, he couldn't see any clues. Even if he was close, he couldn't feel anything strange. If he wanted to obtain this treasure, he had to go to the other side. However, he wasn't in a hurry. Who knew what kind of world it was? He thought for a while. The demon sect cultivator that he killed came alone, so the possibility of him being in the Nether Spring sect was very small. However, he had to be careful of accidents. He immediately made up his mind and a streak of sword light flew around the room. With the reflection of his sword spirit, he immediately saw the scene on the other side. It was a cave room. Other than a pearl on the ceiling and a praying mat on the ground, it was empty without any decorations. From this, it could be seen that this wasn't a long-term residence. It was very likely that this was a temporary place. After making another circle and confirming that there wasn't any danger, he stepped in. When he entered the cave room, he turned around and saw a floating painting on the wall. He thought for a while and didn't rush to take it. Instead, he closed his eyes and sensed it. There was little water and wood around, and there wasn't any chi. He immediately determined that he was in a secluded mountain. There were only 2 chi movements in the cave, and they were weak. Their cultivation wasn't high, but one of them was familiar. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He walked to the entrance of the cave and sensed it. As he expected, the outside was filled with restrictions. He probed further and realized that it was just a warning. Attacking from the outside would cause a huge commotion, but if he attacked from the inside, it would be easy to break. Thus, he waved his sleeves and erased all of them. He pushed open the stone door and stepped out. The sound of the stone door opening immediately alerted the disciple guarding the door. He ran out with a face full of joy and said, "Teacher, you're back." When he saw Zhang Yan's figure, he suddenly stopped and revealed a terrified expression. He screamed and turned to escape. Zhang Yan casually flicked his finger and a small ball of 5 elements devil-slaying divine thunder exploded in the small space. After the spiritual light disappeared, there was nothing there. He walked forward along the path under his feet and calmly stopped in front of a stone room. He waved his hand and removed the restriction on it. He pushed the door and entered. He looked over and saw a young Taoist sitting cross-legged on the couch. In front of him was a jade scroll that was emitting a misty moonlight. Sensing that someone had entered, the person opened his eyes and was shocked. He said in shock, "Manner Master." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Zhao Yang, I didn't want you to be here." Zhao Yang's expression was both awkward and depressed. He said, "It's also my bad luck." Zhang Yan asked and found out that Zhao Yang had borrowed the identity of a disciple of the Netherworld Spring Sect's elder. He wanted to sneak into the Netherworld Spring Sect and gain experience. Originally, he was just a core formation cultivator, so no one paid attention to him. His actions were quite smooth. Unfortunately, Deng Zhonglin and that elder were familiar with each other, so he was a little suspicious. Seeing that Zhao Yang had outstanding talent, he wanted to take him as a disciple. So he half-forced him to stay by his side. Other than not being allowed to go out, he didn't lack any cultivation techniques or treasures. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Fortune and misfortune depend on each other. I see that your cultivation has improved. If you didn't have this opportunity and cultivated step by step, you might not have the situation you have today." Zhao Yang nodded subconsciously. When he was by Deng Zhonglin's side, he was constantly worried about his life. He thought that the only way to prevent himself from being killed was to display his extraordinary aptitude and arouse Deng Zhonglin's desire to cherish talent. Zhang Yan nodded and said, "This is not a place to stay for long. Since I met you, it is also your opportunity. Come with me." Chapter 884. After Zhang Yan finished speaking, he brought Zhao Yang back to the cave they came from, and he stood before the treasure scroll. He raised his finger and spiritual energy surged out from his body and surged forward like tidewater with the intention of refining the treasure scroll. Suddenly, his heart palpitated. He could feel a pair of eyes staring at him. He had seen this aura once when he broke the four-beast formation and immediately knew the identity of the other party. He instantly understood that he had attracted the attention of this person by touching this item. However, his expression was still calm. If Daoist Dong Tian rushed over, it would cause a huge commotion. With his current identity, Qinsung's school would naturally protect him, so he didn't have to worry too much. It seems like the owner of the treasure is still in that person's hands. However, I don't know why it fell into the hands of the demon sect cultivators. Does he want to join hands with them? Thinking about it, he felt that the possibility wasn't high. This person came from the Xianmen sect. Not only would there not be many benefits, but there would also be more drawbacks. Especially since he was staying in the Central Pillar continent. If Shaoqing found out that he was colluding with the demon sect, even if he risked a war between Daoist Dongtian people, he would definitely get rid of this hidden danger. There might be another reason for this. However, no matter what, it had nothing to do with him. Naturally, Daoist Dongtian and the sect leader would worry about this person. Due to the imprint of this person's blood essence on the scroll, it was rather exhausting to refine it. From time to time, he would suddenly struggle when his vital energy weakened, and if the restraining force was slightly weaker, he might even suffer a backlash. Zhang Yan was slightly shocked. It was just a thread of essence blood, but it added so much trouble for him. One could imagine how strong the cultivation of the person behind it was. He thought to himself, I heard from senior brother Zhou that when this person broke out with the treasure, no one in the sect could stop him. In the future, if I step into this realm, I might have to learn a thing or two from him. He waved his sleeves and sat down, using his heart to refine it with magic power. A full 20 days passed, day and night. Finally, the essence blood mark on it slowly disappeared. He completely refined this world entry treasure scroll. He didn't hesitate anymore. He said, follow me. He entered the opposite Xuanlu continent. After Zhao Yang came over, he rolled up his sleeves. He kept the treasure. Up to this point. Even if the person on the scroll had other arrangements. In this small world, he couldn't take it back. Zhao Yang had heard from Zhang Boyan that a powerful cultivator could open a small world with his own qi. However, he had never done it personally. He couldn't help but look around curiously. Zhang Yan looked at him and smiled. He said, there are no Dongtian in the Xuanlu continent, and the spiritual opportunity is abundant. I still have something to do, so you can cultivate here first. However, there are cultivators from the Donghua mystic sect who came here to collect qi. You should try to avoid them as much as possible since you are cultivating the techniques of the Netherworld Spring sect. When I am done, you can follow me back to the clear Serenity Heavenly Lake or stay here. In this Xianlu continent, nascent soul cultivators needed to guard a region and wouldn't easily show themselves. Although Zhao Yang was only a core transformation cultivator, as long as he was careful and didn't cause trouble, no matter where he went, he wouldn't have to worry. The only threat was the cultivators from the Celestial Sect of Wonders. Zhang Yan nodded and flew into the air. 2 hours later, he landed on Huandan Peak. Zhang Yan nodded his head and flew up into the air. He followed the path he came from and after about an hour, he landed on Huandan Peak. Lin Xiaofeng noticed his return and immediately came out to welcome him. He cupped his fists, you're back. Previously, Zhang Yan suddenly left the mountain and was gone for many days. He thought that something had happened. Now that he was back, he was at ease. Zhang Yan smiled, I had something important to attend to. I didn't inform your sect before I left. Lin Xiaofeng hurriedly said, what are you talking about? You're a guest of my sect. You can stay or go as you please. He paused and probed, in these few days, my sect has been tidied up. May I ask, when is it convenient for you to leave? Zhang Yan got the scroll to enter the realm and did not need to rely on other sections. It was much more convenient. However, after he refined the scroll, he still needed to reopen the door. This required him to make a trip himself. He said, if that's the case, I need to return to the sect to make some arrangements. Your sect can wait for a few more days. When there's a letter, you can leave. I will be there to receive you. Lin Xiaofeng was just trying to ask. Now that he was sure, he was delighted. He solemnly cupped his fists. Then my sect will wait for your good news. Zhang Yan cupped his fists and said, I will go first. He intended to head to the outer continent to search for fortuitous encounters after he dealt with this matter here, so he naturally didn't want to stay here for too long. So he didn't delay any longer and flashed a streak of sword light that tore through the sky and headed north. In less than half a day, he arrived at the entrance of the realm. He stepped in and returned to the main hall of the purple light courtyard. He glanced around and saw a Taoist boy on duty in the hall. He was dozing off. Zhang Yan smiled and went forward to pick up the jade mallet. He gently knocked on the boy's head and said, Wake up. The Taoist boy was startled. When he saw who it was, he hurriedly got up and bowed, Jinren Zhang. Zhang Yan asked, Are the two Jinren here? The Taoist boy said, They have returned to the cave residence. But before they left, they said that if Jinren Zhang has something to do, you can go at any time. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, There's no need. He came to the table and wrote 2 letters in an instant. He handed them over and said, Send them to the two Jinren. Don't miss them. The Taoist boy quickly took them and stuffed them into his arms. He held them tightly and said, I will send them. Zhang Yan nodded. He closed his eyes and sat down in the hall to wait. After an hour, a bright light flew into the hall and headed in his direction. He looked over, reached out to take it, opened it, and subconsciously nodded. As expected, Jinren Meng and Jinren Sun were very happy when they learned that he found the treasure scroll. They said that he could arrange the relocation of the Duqin sect, but they didn't mention anything about taking the scroll back to the sect. It was obvious that they agreed that he could keep it for himself. This was also because he was the palace master of the Dujin Palace. In terms of position in the sect, he was only below the people of the heavens abode. In addition, he was the one who found it and temporarily held it in his hand, so no one would say anything. With the permission of the two Jinren Meng, he could act with confidence. However, this was an important place for the 9 courtyards of the Qinsang school, so it wasn't convenient for him to take in inner realm disciples. He went to the Dragon Lake swamp and found an uninhabited reef. He waved his sleeves and took out the treasure scroll. After he opened it, he used his spiritual energy to form a talisman. With a flick of his finger, the talisman flew into the inner realm. After Zhang Yan left, Lin Xiaofeng didn't return to his mansion. He just waited outside the mountain gate. When night fell, he suddenly saw a glowing talisman flying towards him. His face lit up with excitement. He rushed forward and grabbed the talisman. Holding it in front of his eyes, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. He said, I didn't expect things to go so smoothly. He turned around and rushed toward the hall. He was so happy that he forgot about the rules of the sect and rushed in without waiting for an announcement. Yin Zhaokong was cultivating. When he saw Lin Xiaofeng like this, he frowned and asked, Junior brother, why are you in such a hurry? Lin Xiaofeng realized he had lost his composure. He quickly took 2 steps back and said, Little brother is too happy and forgot himself. I hope senior brother can forgive me. Then he looked up and said, Senior brother, it's done. With that, he handed over the talisman with both hands. Yin Zhaokong's eyes also lit up. He took the talisman and looked at it. He sighed. Fellow cultivator Zhang is indeed a trustworthy person. He originally thought there would be a few twists and turns and that the Qinsang school would make them work for them for a few more years. He was already prepared for this, but he didn't expect it to be so easy. At this moment, he felt both lucky and a bit dejected. He pondered a bit and said, in the few days that spiritual master Zhang wasn't here, there were more outer realm cultivators wandering around. The Green Elegance sect and Sea Convergence sect have also made some movements. I believe they already know about my move. Lin Xiaofeng's heart trembled. Although the Duqin sect was the #1 sect in the Xianlu continent, it didn't mean that there were no sects that were similar in power to them. These two sects, Blue Elegance sect and He-Hai sect, were not a match for them, but if they joined forces, they could turn the tables and slightly suppress them. The three sects once had enmity with each other, but they usually had scruples and didn't provoke each other easily. However, if there were outer realm cultivators adding fuel to the fire, then they might take advantage of this gap to invade Huandan Peak. He asked cautiously, "Senior brother, what do you mean?" Yin Zhaokong said, "Since this matter has been decided, there is no need to be overcautious. Go and make some preparations. You and junior brother Zhaoyue will take the elders and disciples to the outer realm first. I will stay here. If the two sects make a move, I will stop them." Lin Zhaofeng was shocked. "Senior brother, you alone?" Yin Zhaokong's indifferent expression changed. His eyes glowed and he said, "My Duqin sect is the direct disciple of Patriarch Bo Wang. If we weren't trapped here, our achievements wouldn't be any worse than those outer realm cultivators. This trip to the 9 continents should let them know that we are not to be trifled with." Lin Zhaofeng knew that this senior brother's cultivation and supernatural powers were exceptional. He immediately stood up and cupped his fists. "I will make the arrangements now." He hurriedly walked a few steps and suddenly turned back. "Sect head senior brother, please take care." He bowed again and left the hall. Yin Zhaokong sat in silence for a moment. He took out a fish talisman that was decorated with brightly colored scales. He placed his hand on it and muttered to himself, "I will bring you out of this world. I hope you can regain your original appearance." Following the movement of his hand, the talisman trembled slightly. Streams of light flowed out like water and covered the hall in an instant. This treasure was left behind by Patriarch Bo Wang. It was called the Ling River Fish Talisman. It was rumored to be a true treasure. However, its power didn't match the records. He had never seen a true spirit before. Therefore, the outer realm couldn't get out of the elephant realm. He guessed that it was most likely due to being trapped in this world. His gaze was faint. There is a saying in the Taoist books, the spirit comes out of the spirit, and the combination is real. After I get out, I want to try. Chapter 885. Green Elegance Sect, Martial Formation Temple. Yuan Yang sect's elder Jiang Heng and his wife Miao Ling were talking to a beautiful Taoist holding a jade ruler. At this moment, a letter flew in from outside the mountain. The Taoist took it and read it. He laughed and said, "The sect sent a message. That Taoist Master Zhang has been away for a month. Just now, he has left." Then there was some movement in the Crossing Earth sect. Everyone in the sect has dressed up and is ready to go to the outer realm. Intentionally or unintentionally, Jiang Heng's left hand stroked the sword at his waist and said, "In that case, your sect can act now." The Taoist said, "Just my sect is not a match for the Crossing Earth sect. I need to discuss this with the cultivators from the He-Hai temple." He looked at the couple and smiled. "Of course. If you two are willing to act, there is no need to wait." Jiang Heng frowned. "Fellow Taoist must be joking. This is a matter of your Xianlu continent. If we interfere, we will attract unnecessary trouble." Miao Ling said in a serious tone, "Elder Guan, this is a fight between the 3 sections. It is not good for outsiders to interfere." The Taoist said, "What if that Taoist Master Zhang doesn't allow it?" Jiang Heng snorted. "Then he will be the one in the wrong. My wife and I will help you." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "I'm relieved to hear that from the two of you." The Green Elegance sect had spies in the Crossing Earth sect. When they heard that the sect was going to move to the outer realm, they were shocked. They had a lot of hatred with the Crossing Earth sect. They wanted to take advantage of the fact that the sect was weak after its disciples left the sect. They wanted to join forces with the He-Hai sect to end their hatred. However, they heard that there was an outer realm cultivator in the sect, so they didn't know what his attitude was. After all, the destruction of the Shanghua sect 1,000 years ago was still in front of them, so they didn't dare to act rashly. In the end, someone suggested asking for help from an outer realm cultivator. At most, they would give him some earth-en essence. After some searching, they finally found the Yuanyang sect. The Yuanyang sect's people were led by Jiang Heng and his wife. They only thought for a moment before agreeing. At this moment, another letter arrived. The concierge apologized and took a few glances at it. At first, he was stunned, but then a look of joy appeared on his face. He said excitedly, "You too." In this letter, Mo Zhaoyue and Lin Zhaofeng had already led their elders and disciples out of the mountain and headed north, but they did not see sect leader Yin Zhaokong. He must still be guarding the mountain. If he wants to make a move, it would be now. Jiang Heng's gaze shifted and he said, "May I ask, fellow Taoist, are you going to deal with the group that left the mountain gate first?" The servant replied, "That's exactly what I intend to do." "Could it be that you have a different opinion?" Jiang Heng bluntly said, "According to what fellow Taoist said earlier, Yin Zhaokong is the person with the most profound magic power in the Crossing Earth sect. Why don't we deal with him first, and then slowly deal with the rest? Also, there must be a reason for this arrangement. Fellow Taoist, you must be careful." The servant lowered his head and pondered. He wasn't afraid of the Crossing Earth sect, but of Zhang Yan and the other Outer Realm cultivators. He originally planned to surround Mo Zhaokong and the others and kill them if he could. Even if he couldn't, he could lure Yin Zhaokong out of the mountain gate and kill him. But after thinking about it, Jiang Heng's words were reasonable. If he followed the Crossing Earth sect, he might fall into their trap. He might as well ignore it and focus on killing Yin Zhaokong first. Even if something unexpected happened, it would be easy to retreat. But thinking about this, he sighed and said awkwardly, "But that mountain gate formation is not easy to break." Jiang Heng snorted and said, "No matter how powerful the mountain gate formation is, it still needs enough people to guard it. What can he do by himself? In my opinion, Yin Zhaokong is stupid to not travel with his fellow sect members. I have a talisman here called the Unraveling Needle. Fellow Taoist can use it to break the formation." With a shake of his hand, he threw out a talisman from his sleeve. One end was pointed, the other was round, and the length of the needle was 3 feet long. It floated in the air and emitted a dazzling light. Its qi was extremely sharp. This treasure was originally used to deal with the formations of the various sections. He brought it from the sect. Although it wasn't a true weapon, it was still a top-grade profound level weapon. The servant also had good eyesight. With one look, he knew what it was used for. Instantly, he was overjoyed and took it. As he put it into his sleeve, he said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist." Jiang Heng said, "I'm not helping you for nothing. Just remember to share some with me." The servant solemnly vowed, "If we can occupy Huandan Peak, we will share the earth qi we obtain with your sect." Because he needed to go back and make arrangements for the siege, after a few more words of discussion, he stood up and left. In the pavilion, only the Jiang couple were left. Miao Ling asked uneasily, "Husband, that Huandan Peak is something that Jinren Zhang has his eyes on. If we help Sangxiu sect this time, will we anger him?" During the battle at the Devil's Cave, Yuan Yang, Nan Hua, and Tai Hao sects secretly sent disciples to the Devil's Cave in the North Continent. After that, they all sent envoys to Qinsong to apologize. Under such circumstances, it was no longer appropriate to offend Qinsong. Jiang Heng sneered, "Your husband's mind is still clear and not muddle-headed." Jinren Zhang fought 1 against 8 in the Devil's Cave. Senior apprentice Sister Lu was full of praise for him and admitted that she was far inferior. "Your husband can't wait to hide, why would I really fight him? Your husband has other plans this time." Miao Ling was puzzled, "Husband, what are your plans?" Jiang Heng smiled viciously and said, "After Tsangxiu sect and Hahai sect's cultivators make their move, we will gather our disciples and assist Yin Zhaokong. We will counterattack and kill all the elders of these 2 sections. Then we will destroy the mountain gates of these 2 sections. This way, not only can we do Jinren Zhang a favor, we can also take the land of these 2 sects for ourselves." Miao Ling turned pale with fright. She did not expect that her husband, who usually looked so pure and kind, would actually use such a vicious plan. Her eyes widened, unable to accept it. Jiang Heng said unhappily, "Junior apprentice sister, why are you looking at me like that? If this is done, the responsibility of the two of us losing our essence qi can also be forgiven." Miao Ling lowered her head. She hesitated and bit her lip. What if Tsangxiu sect wants us to establish a contract? Jiang Heng sneered and said, "It's them who are begging us. It's not like we are begging them to establish a contract. We can delay it first. If we really can't avoid it, then there's no harm in signing it." Miao Ling said blankly, "Since it's signing a contract, then what will husband do?" Jiang Heng cupped his hands towards the sky and said, "I've already reported this matter to the sect. When the time comes, senior brother Wen and his wife will come to help. To deal with this junior, it's more than enough. Anyway, your husband has already made all the necessary arrangements. Junior apprentice sister, you don't have to worry." Miao Ling was a kind-hearted person and she disapproved of this kind of treacherous action. But since the sect had already made arrangements, it was obvious that the teachers had tacitly agreed to it. She was helpless and could only struggle to say, "If Elder Guan and the rest have their guard up." Jiang Heng laughed heartily. As if he had heard a big joke, he said disdainfully, "Junior apprentice sister thinks too highly of this junior. This kind of small sect only has 1 or 2 third-stage realm cultivators in the past 1,000 years. With their experience, how would they know our Yuan Yang sect's background? Even if there are arrangements, it's like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, not worth mentioning." When Miao Ling heard this, she couldn't help but blame herself. She thought to herself, "If I hadn't made a mistake in my previous arrangements and lost the essence, my husband wouldn't have done this. In the end, these people are suffering because of me." About a quarter of an hour later, the informant came to visit again. This time, he was accompanied by a tall and thin Taoist with a cold face. He introduced, "This is Elder Guo of the He Hai sect. This time, he's coming with us." Elder Guo came forward and bowed. "Greetings to the two of you." Jiang Heng returned the greeting. After exchanging a few pleasantries, everyone took their seats. The informant went straight to the point. "Today's matter is very important. We have to sign the contract. I wonder if the two of you have any objections." He was originally smiling and amiable, but now his expression was solemn and his eyes were filled with killing intent. It seemed that if the two of them didn't agree, he would immediately fall out with them. Jiang Heng's heart trembled. He looked at the contract and said cautiously, "If no cultivators from the outer realm come out, we won't do anything." The informant solemnly said, "Of course." Jiang Heng only needed to confirm this point, so he didn't say anything else. He immediately wrote his name on the contract, forced out a drop of blood, and pressed it on the contract. Seeing this, the informant let out a sigh of relief and did the same. Elder Guo also wrote his name on the contract. After the contract was signed, the informant smiled again. He cupped his hands and said, "Time is of the essence. We'll move out now. If there are enemies later, we'll have to rely on the two of you." Jiang Heng said with a smile that wasn't a smile, "Fellow informant is too polite. Didn't you tell us that working together will benefit both of us?" The informant clapped. "That's right." Elder Guo suddenly asked, "May I ask if the two of you can help me if I want to go outside?" Jiang Heng couldn't help but be startled. The pipeline master also looked over, and his eyes were filled with a burning desire. Even though Black Heron Continent was large, it was still too small for nascent soul cultivators. Moreover, those with slightly greater cultivation would always feel uncomfortable as if they were trapped in a cage. If they had the chance to leave, they would naturally not be willing to stay here. Miao Ling said, "If Elder Guo is willing to go, of course, but can you allow me to take some essence from your sect?" Elder Guo shook his head. "This is not something I can decide." Jiang Heng looked at Miao Ling with slight dissatisfaction. "This matter is not urgent, let's talk about it later." The informant smiled. "That's right, there's no hurry. Right now, it's more important to get rid of the enemy." Miao Ling sighed. If Elder Guo could agree to give up the sect's earth energy, even if it was just a fake promise, they could avoid a massacre. The four of them left the pavilion together. As soon as Jiang Heng stepped out of the pavilion, he saw that there was a pavilion suspended in the sky, about 100 zhang in size. Below it was a ribbon of clouds that resembled a river, stretching out for several li. It was a magnificent sight. The informant pointed at the object and said proudly, "This is our sect's broken capital river cloud boat. It can gather the power of thousands of cultivators in one place. With the help of this object and the formation-breaking magical treasure that fellow informant borrowed, we can definitely take Yin Zhaokong's life." Jiang Heng frowned. There was something strange about this small world. True treasures were all suppressed. Perhaps this was the reason why it was difficult for cultivators in this small world to form their own grotto heavens. Without a true treasure, this kind of treasure was very difficult to break. This operation was not as easy as he had thought. Chapter 886. On a nameless island in the great pool of Dragon Lake, a light screen rose up from the treasure scroll. As the sun shone down, it was as if the water was connected to the sky. Zhang Yan was sitting cross-legged on a rock. He had already received the letter. The Crossing Earth sect had already left the sect and were heading towards the great pool of Dragon Lake. 1,000 people coming was not a small matter, so he had to personally oversee it to prevent any accidents from happening. At the Xianlu continent, he had already arranged for Jingyu to be the guide. After a few days, the light screen rippled and Lin Zhaofeng walked out. The person behind him was a Dao child. Aside from the two of them, there was no one else. Lin Zhaofeng looked around cautiously. When he saw Zhang Yan's figure, his expression relaxed and he bowed. "Fellow cultivator Zhang." Zhang Yan returned the greeting with a smile. He pointed outside and said, "Fellow Taoist Lin, please take a look. This is the Dragon Lake of my Deep Azure sect. There are no restrictive formations here. Fellow Taoists from your esteemed sect can rest assured and come over." Lin Zhaofeng was a bit embarrassed. He knew that his appearance had been seen by the other party just now. He coughed and changed the topic. "Wait for me to call my fellow sect members over, then I'll chat with fellow cultivator." He whispered to the Taoist child beside him. The latter responded and ran back. Not long after, more than 1,000 cultivators came out in a line. Many of the elders didn't want to be able to escape the cage one day, so they looked around in a daze. At the same time, like Lin Zhaofeng, their eyes were filled with caution. This couldn't be blamed on them. They were originally cultivating in the Xianlu continent, so it was inevitable that they would be like this now that they were in a completely unfamiliar place. However, the junior disciples didn't have such complicated thoughts. This was the first time they had come to the outer realm, so they looked around curiously. However, aside from a vast expanse of smoke, there was nothing else in their field of vision. Jingyu walked to Zhang Yan's side and whispered, "Master, everyone has been brought over." Zhang Yan glanced around and memorized everyone's faces. After pondering for a bit, he turned around and asked, "Fellow cultivator Lin, why haven't I seen your sect master?" Lin Zhaofeng sighed. "When we were about to leave, we heard that enemies were coming. Senior apprentice brother was afraid that something would happen to the sect, so he stayed behind to guard the sect. I don't know how it is right now." Zhang Yan nodded his head and said, "So that's how it is. Outside the great swamp, there are many beautiful mountains and rivers. I have already chosen a place for your sect. If you don't mind, I can bring you there to settle down first before entering the lower realm to receive your sect leader." There were many mountains and rivers to the south of the great pool of Dragon Lake. Because it was close to one of the few spirit caves in the world, it was not much different from a normal sect's mountain gate. When Lin Zhaofeng heard this, his heart was filled with joy. It was inevitable that he would feel like he was living under someone else's roof. Now that he had entered this world, to be able to immediately find a place to stay was the best. He cupped his fists and said, "I can't thank you enough." Zhang Yan waved his hand and put away the treasure scroll into his sleeve. He then threw it out. A ray of light flew out and turned into a flying palace that was 100 feet long. He first stepped inside and invited everyone to come up. Then, he cast a spell and the flying palace was lifted up by a cloud and slowly moved out of the sect. After leaving the great pool of Dragon Lake, they traveled south for another 10 minutes. Zhang Yan retracted his mana and the flying palace landed on a mountain. Lin Xiaofeng looked around and saw that the mountain range here was like the sea, the water flowing around the peaks, the white chain like a dragon, the atmosphere was magnificent. He couldn't help but secretly nod his head. It was his first time here, to be able to temporarily stay in such a place was already not bad. He tilted his head and saw that the north and east ends of the horizon were filled with water vapor. Needless to say, the north was the great pool of Dragon Lake and the east was the boundless ocean. He couldn't help but take a few more glances at this place where he was going to rebuild the sect in the future. At that moment, he suddenly felt a throbbing in his senses. He turned around and saw 4 rays of light that could be said to be full of vigor coming from the north. In an instant, they arrived in front of him. Then, the light dispersed and 4 Taoists walked out. His heart shook. These 4 people were actually in the 3rd stage of Yuanying and their cultivation was very profound. He couldn't help but tense up. The 4 Taoists walked up and bowed to Zhang Yan. They said in unison, "Greetings, Hall Master." Zhang Yan returned the greeting and smiled, "Thank you for your hard work." The leading Taoist said, "Hall Master is too kind." When Lin Xiaofeng saw this scene, he was instantly quite shocked. He then glanced at Zhang Yan and thought to himself, fellow Zhang can even casually order around a 3rd stage cultivator with such a deep cultivation. Looks like his status in the sect is even higher than what I previously thought. After Zhang Yan finished talking to the 4 Taoists, he turned around and said, "Taoist Lin, now that the East Flower continent is going through a calamity, the situation around us is unstable. Your sect needs to quickly set up a protective formation. This is my Duzhen Palace's elder, he can help you protect your sect during this period of time." Mo Xiaoyue heard this and couldn't help but say loudly, "Why go through so much trouble? My Duqin sect can." When Lin Xiaofeng heard this, he hurriedly stopped him and didn't let him continue. He then cupped his hands to Zhang Yan and said, "Then I thank you for your kindness." After all, they weren't cultivators of the East Flower continent. It was normal for the other party to make such arrangements. If they wanted to harm them, there was no need to go through all this trouble. It was unwise to be entangled in such a small matter. Zhang Yan made such arrangements not to keep an eye on them, but because the appearance of so many people here would most likely attract the attention of the Devil Sect. The Devil Sect's methods were strange and they had many ways to play with people's hearts. The cultivators of the Xianlu continent had never dealt with them before. If they suddenly encountered them, they would most likely be plotted against. With these Duzhen Palace's elders, they could be on guard. Half a day had already passed by the time he had finished arranging everything here. Zhang Yan declined Mo Xiaoyue and Lin Xiaofeng's suggestion to follow him. He opened up the realm entry scroll again and with a flash of light, he passed through the door and entered the Xianlu continent. Every time the scroll was opened, the place he entered and exited was different from the last time. Therefore, the place he stepped into was an unfamiliar place. After determining the direction, he flew towards the Huandan Peak. 6 hours later, he was within 100 miles of the Huandan Peak. When he looked over, the peak was surrounded by a thick layer of dark clouds. Occasionally, there were flashes of lightning. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. This was a sign that the formation of the mountain gate was broken and did not recover, causing the spiritual vigor to be scattered. His speed increased a bit, relying on the talisman he got from Lin Xiaofeng's body, he arrived at the mountain unimpeded. He saw that most of the beautiful temples on the mountain had collapsed, almost turned into ruins. Most of the original floating peaks in the sky had also fallen to the ground. However, he could still sense a vigorous aura condensed at the peak. With a flash of light, he arrived at the peak in an instant. He looked down and saw Yin Xiaokong sitting alone on a broken rock. However, his expression was calm. Other than looking slightly tired, there was nothing wrong with him. He seemed to have sensed that someone had arrived. He raised his eyes and saw that it was Zhang Yan. He stood up and bowed. Jinren Zhang is here. Zhang Yan asked, Sect Master Yin, did the enemy attack the mountain gate? Yin Zhaokong's expression was calm. He smiled. There were a few enemies who came looking for us, but they have all been dealt with. Zhang Yan saw that he was unwilling to say more and did not pursue the matter. He threw out a talisman and said, the disciples of your sect have already settled down in the Donghua continent. This is what fellow Daoist Lin asked me to pass to you. Yin Zhaokong took it and looked at it carefully. It was indeed the token that he had agreed with his junior apprentice brother. He was instantly relieved. He raised his head and looked around. He pointed and said, the qi of the earth here will be handed over to Jinren today. Zhang Yan did not stand on ceremony. He smiled and said yes. He looked around and pondered for a moment. Then, he flicked his sleeves and threw out dozens of banners. Then, he cast spells. The banners shone with spiritual light and gradually formed a matrix with him as the center. This matrix was not used to trap people, but to make it convenient for him to collect the qi of the earth. After doing this, he leaped into the sky and threw Yan Zhujing's bottle up into the sky. He then used his mana again and in an instant, the rolling qi of the earth was pulled out and gathered into the bottle. A few months later, in the heart of the defense grotto, Zhou Ruiying sat behind the table and held a letter in her hand. She frowned and thought to herself, the qi of the earth was taken by that Zhang Yan. Looking at the situation, after he returns, he will try to break through to the next realm. This person is Zhou Chongju's disciple. In the future, when he gains power, he will definitely make things difficult for the Zhou family. There was actually an unspeakable reason in her heart. Back then, after the sword battle between the 16 sects, she used a clone to chase after Zhang Yan. The two of them could be said to have been enemies for a long time. Thinking about this, she felt annoyed. She pinched the corner of her sleeve and thought to herself, why don't I think of a way to stop him? But after thinking for a while, she could not come up with a solution. Zhang Yan was now a side hall master of one of the 3 halls of the Dark Azure sect. It was difficult to plot against such a figure with ordinary tactics. After thinking for a long time, she stood up and went to the front of a lamp. She flicked out a spark, and immediately a cluster of light rose 3 feet high. Not long after, a blurry figure appeared and said, Junior apprentice sister, why are you looking for me? Zhou Ruiying said, Senior apprentice brother, you also received the news from the small world? The person opposite her chuckled and said, I have heard of it. Why do you mention this, junior apprentice sister? Zhou Ruiying said seriously, Senior apprentice brother should know the identity of that Zhang Yan. If we let him gain power, it will inevitably be disadvantageous to the Zhou family. The person opposite her immediately understood what she meant and immediately became silent, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he suddenly said, Junior apprentice sister, do you still remember the matter of Qin Taiping's Daoren sacrificial refining of the 36 peaks? Zhou Ruiying nodded and said, Qin Taiping has been sacrificial refining this treasure for a few years. I heard that it needs 36 heavenly 100 reincarnation stones. It seems that there are still 2 left, but what does this have to do with the matter at hand? The person said leisurely, although heavenly 100 reincarnation stones are hard to find, we happen to have 2 in South Cliff Continent. Junior apprentice sister, you can write to Qin Taiping and borrow some Jun Yang essence from them. He will promise to return it after 300 or 400 years. Zhou Ruiying's eyes brightened. Since Zhang Yan came to the small world to obtain qi, it was very likely that he wanted to borrow qi to achieve success. With the foundation of his first-grade Dan, the heaven essence and earth qi he needed must be several times more than ordinary people. The qi stored in Qinsang school might not be enough. If she could borrow some, it might really be able to slow down his progress. But immediately, she shook her head and said, Senior apprentice brother, you are thinking too much. The Jun Yang essence is such an important thing, Qinsang school might not be willing to take it out. The person chuckled and said meaningfully, if we don't try, how will we know? Besides, I, Yu Xiao, am not going to return it. It's just a few hundred years late.